beginning of the end for you.
To the sky!
Bestowed upon you the power of the sun.
A mighty sword!
Strike while the iron's hot.
For Camelot! For Avalon!
Let the heavens rain! I am Ragnarok!
Good afternoon and happy Friday, SMITE fans, as we get ready to jump into our second half of phase number 3 of the SMITE Pro League here on this lovely Friday afternoon in Alpharetta, Georgia. My name is J. Mac Tucker. We're introducing you into our now second half and second round robin, and all of this brought to us by our good friends over at Prime Gaming. If you haven't already gotten a Prime membership, do so you can get free shipping, music, movies, and more with that, and then link that over to your Twitch account and get Prime Gaming, so you can get free games, free content, and other games that you might already be playing, as well as a free Twitch Prime subscription to your favorite streamer out there. Thank you so much to Prime Gaming for being the title sponsor of Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. And of the SMITE Pro League, as I mentioned, we're in the last half of it. This is part 2, Electric Boogaloo, of phase number 3. All these teams have played each other once. It's been able to get ourselves a nice little kind of shake-up in the standings and whatnot. And now as we start moving in towards the World Championship, these are the last weeks of play before it is strictly eliminations and playoff styles of go. Once these teams have gone through their second round robin, they'll move into the top 6 teams. We'll go to the phase 3 playoffs. That will determine our first 4 teams that will qualify to the SMITE World Championships in January. After that, we'll have 2 weeks of play with the SCC and SOC teams of both EU and NA. We'll take the top 2 teams from each of those, move them in, and they'll face off against the 4 SPL teams who didn't qualify to Worlds in that first week of January. And then we'll take the 4 out of those 8 in that January 6th through 8th weekend. The 4 who move on from there will go to the World Championships in January. So the name of the game is win games, go to Worlds. It makes your path that much easier for you. And again, World Championships January 13th through 15th in Arlington, Texas. So getting the wins now, very important for these teams, makes it that much easier, especially when you look at your top 2 teams. And it's not just me here on the desk. I've got Mifflin to help me get us through the first half of our day. We've got some great sets. Again, now that we're in the new round robin, all these teams are playing against each other again. And what I wanted to start off with, it's one that we kind of capped off the week with last time. It was the Bolts and the Warriors. Those guys are going to be playing against each other again, and we're going to have a couple of seeds of those matchups taking place in this week as we look at the schedule. Olympus Bolts, Oni Warriors, and Jade Dragon Solar Scarabs for today. And then normally what's only was reserved for Sunday's triple header, now with these next few weeks, we're going to be seeing a few more of these sprinkled in there. So Saturday and Sunday, 3 matches apiece. Dragons, Kings, Warriors, Titans, Leviathans, Valkyries for Saturday. Bolts, Scarabs, Kings, Valks, and then Leviathans, Titans to end out on Sunday. So 8 matches as opposed to our usual 7, so at least 1 more. But then once we start moving into the next week and the week after that, we're having, I believe it's 4 days of play for each of those ones. So we'll be getting a lot of SPL sandwiched in these next few weeks of plays. Then we can take a look at the standings to see what happened kind of in not week 1, the first half of our phase. It's the Leviathans at the top of the standings, 6-1, the definitive number 1 seed, but right hot on their heels, Dragons, Warriors, and Kings, all 5-2. And you kind of see a little bit of a gap right there, a couple of games between the Kings and the Titans to kind of separate that top 4 and that bottom 4 there, Mifflin.
Yeah, I'm really excited primarily for the bottom 4 as of now. And it feels weird saying bottom 4 and looking down and seeing the Titans and the Bolts, teams that have been at the top of the standings at various points throughout the year. I expect those 2 to be able to pick it up a little bit in the second half, specifically the Bolts. We heard about it on the waiting room. They've been on a bit of a slump recently, having to deal with some roster changes. I expect them to be able to jump out of that, but it's a question of how long is that going to take? Are we going to see it today? Are they going to be able to reprise their win up against the Oni Warriors? Is it going to take a couple more weeks? Because as we get closer and closer to Worlds, every single match starts to matter a little bit more. You need to start getting into gear. And the Olympus Bolts, a team that have got a ton of fans, would love to see them get into gear.
Yeah, I think the Olympus Bolts fan base, I think the Olympus Bolts players themselves definitely want to try and see themselves more on the up and up and get that rise through. And one of the players, I mean, he's been around the scene for a long time. We always talk about the tenure of this team as a whole with how long some of these players have been there. Very few have been playing the game as long as BaRRaCCuDDa has over in that dual lane. He has got to be and needs to kind of step up to be that pillar for his squad, maybe to jump into some of the shot calling position out there. I know that's been one of the struggles we've been talking about just between us and out there is that it feels like this team kind of lost a voice. When Haddix left this team, they lost one of those shot callers. They lost one of those players out there. But BaRRaCCuDDa has been around the scene for so long. He's got to be that one to step up. And I think in the last matchup that they did have against the Bolts, or not against the Bolts, against the Oni Warriors that the Bolts did have, I think really looking at BaRRaCCuDDa's performance really shows that he has been starting to make that step up for his squad.
Yeah, I mean, at various points throughout the year, BaRRaCCuDDa's looked very good, at times very cold. I think recently, in the most recent set, back to looking very, very good. But asking BaRRaCCuDDa to be primary shot caller for your team, I think is a difficult ask. ADC is such a mechanically demanding role where you need to land your auto attacks consistently. You don't exactly have the best ability to realize when dive potential is there, as you're largely relegated to playing in your own backline, which is generally why we see junglers, soul laners, even supports kind of take up that mantle. If they can create space, your ADCs are allowed to free cast, and that's when they look like they're at their best. So having BaRRaCCuDDa kind of, you know, dictate the macro while simultaneously trying to figure out his DPS, while simultaneously looking for the 1v1 in lane, is a very, very difficult situation. Generally, from my experience, I've noticed ADCs are very good at communicating when objectives are potential. Hey, I've got damage output now. We can look at this structure. Hey, I finished my first crit item. I think we can probably burn down Gold Fury very quickly. That's generally the type of communication you'll see from high-end ADCs, whereas team fight macro calling, target selection, things along those lines, a little bit more difficult for them to communicate.
For sure in that regard. And I mean, kind of looking at the ADC pool that we've been kind of watching over the course of these last few weeks, we know that Cupid has really been dominating the meta out there, but when I look over at some of BaRRaCCuDDa's recent plays, Cupid's not even in the conversation. Look to the opposite side over there. Vote for the Oni Warriors has been playing almost nothing but Cupid. Cupid and Rom have been the last 6 games that he has played. Majority of those ones has been the Cupid. Whether that be because whenever it gets the Bolts, that God is banned away, or BaRRaCCuDDa really is trying to shy away from there. I think kind of seeing the God diversity really just between those two players kind of talks about maybe where some of that pressure on the map is being put. You think of Cupid, next thing I'm immediately going into something like Ymir for NeilMah, and that's really trying to get that establishment in that dual lane. It feels like the Warriors are a team that try and put that pressure into multiple lanes, the dual lane being one of those with Vote.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dichotomy between the playstyle between BaRRaCCuDDa and Vote, in that when you look at Vote's gods, it's the Cupids, the Roms, gods that can generate pressure in lane, that can drag the attention of their enemies towards his lane. Because when you look at the compositions that the Oni Warriors decide to build out, generally their hyper carries in the center of the map. You want Dardez playing something that's going to carry you in the late game. Whereas when you look at BaRRaCCuDDa's picks, especially in his last 6, Freya, Shibalanke, Cernunnos, Ishtar, all gods that are very, very strong in those late game team fights. That's where their hyper carry is. That's where the Bolts are trying to, I suppose, generate strength into the late game. Whereas Vote, it feels like his main job is, look at me, don't look at Dardez, keep looking at me, rotate to my lane, junglers come over here, and it kind of creates that space for Dardez to free farm, collect his own buffs, and then start rotating very quickly in towards these objective team fights and be that menace for his team. That said, this is a pressure meta. We hear it every single time the pros come on to talk to us. Pressure dictates the meta right now, and looking at Vote's god pool as opposed to BaRRa's, I'd argue it's a little bit more in line with the standard, which is probably why we've been seeing the Warriors have a good deal of success recently.
Yeah, the Warriors are a team that not only put it into the dual lane either. I mean, this is a team where if you're dialing back even 3-4 weeks of play, you look at these guys and go, okay, you can't let these guys have Morrigan, you can't let these guys have Dodgy. Well, some teams were good at that. They were banning both those ones away, and the Oni Warriors would typically kind of struggle in that regard and then look over towards Nika or Vote to kind of step up and help. Not that they couldn't win games if they didn't get those picks, but it was a little bit more difficult. Now we've been seeing some of those teams kind of let this Morrigan go through every so often. We've been seeing a little bit more success over there. And it really does feel like it's alleviated some of that pressure from Vote and from Nika to where they don't feel like they have to always turn around and kind of be that carry for the squad.
No, the Oni Warriors are a multifaceted team right now. And it feels like it's not just Vote, right? It's not just Dardez. It feels like every single one of their god pools is just in meta. Maybe the Oni Warriors got an in on the design team, right? Because it really does just feel like things have lined up for them as we start to approach closer and closer to Worlds. And when you hear them talk, I mean, it's probably glib. They're probably having a bit of fun, but Nika's saying, hey, if I get Hades, that's an instant win. That's our win condition. We're just going to win off that pick. Or Dardez says, yo, if I get AMC, GG. Like, good luck. It doesn't matter what else we can draft around us. So having that confidence not only in individual star players like Nika, who have been very consistent throughout the year, but now Dardez stepping up, Vote finding some picks that he's going to be very successful on, NeilMah getting back to his aggressive tendencies. The Oni Warriors are certainly a threat in the league right now, and I'll be keeping my eyes on them.
And the Oni Warriors being one of those top teams definitely shows that they are a threat. And we got a chance to sit down with a couple of players, one from each of the teams, BaRRaCCuDDa and Nika. We had a chance to talk to them, so we'll throw it over to that interview video.
This week was probably our weakest performances. Titan set was pretty straightforward. We won pretty easily. And Bolts, I mean, was our own second loss of this split. I think we kind of just didn't really prepare as well as we should have maybe. And game day, they got a lot of really lucky breaks on the coin tosses on objectives and stuff. And stuff like that happens, so.
He's gonna look for it over the wall. There's the leap. What? Get the fire giant off the leap of the Bastet. 4 members.
I feel like we did pretty poorly against Kings. We were always second to respond and we weren't playing proactively enough. And we kind of did the same thing against Warriors game 1. And then we just said, okay, let's stop being scared. Let's actually do plays. Let's play how we normally play. And then game 2 and 3, they weren't as clean as we would have liked, but it was nice to actually be able to make plays on the map and to be proactive and be able to cross the halfway point of the map. It felt pretty nice.
I don't think the upcoming rematch will be an issue. I think today was just one of those where they were destined to win. I think a lot went their way today, and I think next time it won't be an issue.
I don't know if they'll stick to the same drafts. They are a team that likes to do the same thing over and over again. So they're either going to refine what they're already doing with the AMC Cupid, or they're going to try to figure out a different comp to play. I think the bye week will help us a lot kind of restabilize, especially after a confidence booster about time against Warriors. And we're still going to be scrimming the whole time. Unfortunately, we don't really have an off week. I guess we can relax on the weekend those 2 days, but most likely we're going to be doing VOD review or something SMITE related during that time. So not really a bye week for us. We're just going to keep grinding.
I don't think the bye week's going to change too much for us. We're still going to scrim. It's going to be the same as if there wasn't a bye week. We're just going to practice. I'm not sure if there's a big patch coming up or anything, but yeah, we'll be ready, just as always.
I think maybe kind of important to kind of pull at the end of the conversation that was being had there, which is, we're moving into a bye week for these guys. For the bye week, for some teams, it's okay, we're just going to keep our normal scrim pace out there. But for some of these other teams, for some of these top teams, or even for some of the teams that are really struggling, it kind of becomes a double down week. We need to do extra VOD review, we need to do extra scrim blocks out there. And I think by BaRRaCCuDDa saying that really shows that this is a team that is wanting to get that improvement. It's a team that wants to get that step up and pull themselves out of being in that bottom 4 slot.
Yeah, I'm not certain that any team in the league took that bye week as a week off, right? We are so close to Worlds. This is what everybody's been playing for the last, 11 months gearing up until this point. Can't imagine they're taking that week off. The Bolts are not alone in using that week as VOD review.
No, for sure. As we jump into the picks and bans for game number 1, it's the second half of the phase. Every single one of these games extremely important in the standings, and that's even just going beyond just individual sets. This is every individual game, because once we start getting into the top 4, the second, third, and fourth, when you get into these tiebreaker matchups, every single game could make the difference between being the number 4 seed or the number 2 seed out in that regard. So the Oni Warriors definitely want to try and take as many individual games as they can throughout here, as well as finding their set wins. But as the first few bans start to roll out, something that was brought up just earlier on, talk about the Warriors. 2 of the biggest win conditions they've had over the course of this year has been that Morgan Dodgy, and even as of recent, this Ymir. That's all going to be taken away by the Bolts. And on the opposite side, Umoja, Hades, and BaRRaCCuDDa all banned away.
Yeah, it feels bad for the Oni Warriors being forced to ban some of their favorite selections as well, the BaRRaCCuDDa and the Hades, ones that they would love to be able to pick up, but in second pick position, much more risky to leave it available to the Bolts. And then Cern locked in first overall. I knew that there would be some shakeups with the Hunter meta, especially in competitive play with some of the itemization changes. We've seen 2 builds that are very viable. You can go for the standard tank shred yellow damage build, or you can go down that crit tree. But either way, some of the buffs and to Cern recently, the cripple on Bramble Blast, the ultimate now dealing damage to the minions as well, means that he finds pressure in wave a little bit more easily. Just the raw damage output that he's allowed to go towards, and the fact that Devourer's Gauntlets is back in the meta kind of lines up to a place where Cern is now also very strong in the late game, but decent at finding some pressure in the laning phase as well. I'm not so certain about how that matchup's going to look into Cupid, though. No CC immunity in Cern's kit means that Fields of Love will likely just find some value. And then the Pele lock-in, too, for the Oni Warriors, taking away one of the Bolts' favorites. That's a flex pick for the Bolts. Generally, that Pele can either go into the jungle or at times in the mid lane, and the Oni Warriors don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, so Pele Going over to the Warriors for QvoFred, something that he has shown a propensity on into the past as well. Has only had one of his last 6 games so far on that god. Didn't end up getting a win up against the Solar Scarabs with that. Most recently has been kind of straying over towards the Hun Bats, especially if he can get it coupled with a god like the Morrigan.
Really?
Then the Olympus Bolts go to Bastet, and there are certain individual players within the league. You get to this Bastet, you don't really show much worry towards. You think probably Scream, probably the most notable of those ones. But how do you feel about LASBRA piloting a god like Bastet, who's not really at the meta right now?
I mean, LASBRA is very good at Bastet, and he went towards this pick in the previous set against the Oni Warriors. Actually, it was that phenomenal Fire Giant steal that essentially won the Bolts the set there. But I think Bastet this high in your draft is essentially LASBRA saying, look, the Oni Warriors are going to ban me out. They're going to ban out all my favorite picks, which is the standard play against LASBRA, who is one of the most consistent players of the Bolts. The general dynamic around him is if LASBRA's having a good day, the Bolts are going to have a good day. So getting his pick early on means that you can kind of at least control the RNG of that good day a little bit more so. So I like the selection for LASBRA. I like him having a vote of confidence saying, get me this now, and I will perform on it. But whether or not Bastet is such a high priority or whether or not there were other assassins that I think LASBRA could have also had a performance on, I think that they probably could have waited until after the second phase of bans to look towards his pick. And in taking it so early, you allow the Oni Warriors to start banning out guys that have been very strong elsewhere. That set could have gone towards mid to generate some of that pressure we were talking about, deal with that late game hyper carry that Dardez is most likely to take for himself. Or even the Freya, which has been suiting BaRRaCCuDDa very well, now can get banned out. I think it almost would have been a little bit more valuable for the Bolts to allow LASBRA to be the lightning rod for bans.
Well, as the next picks do start to roll through, a Muzen the top 3 for the Oni Warriors, so AMC and a Pele in that 2v2, double Hunter composition, and then a Nox drafted for the Oni Warriors for that support role over there. And then for the bans on the opposite end, the Olympus Bolts did take away Khepri and Cthulhu with that Artio picked up. Very high chance that one does end up going over to Awesome Jake in the dual lane. And as you highlighted, the Freya and now the set banned away by the Oni Warriors to put a little bit of pressure, at least over towards Venenu in that regard. Because the Cernunnos has been flexing over towards mid. We see, I believe Dardez was one of the first players to kind of take that god over into the mid. We started seeing other mid laners adapt to that one. So now kind of looking at this composition and what the Oni Warriors have, what is missing maybe from the Bolts to try and face off against some of this shred that the Oni Warriors have?
Yeah, when I'm looking at the Bolts and I look at the bans, I'd almost immediately said to myself, Vulcan looks pretty good here, right? You've got the CC lockdown, the blink stun from Artio, a pull in from Bastet, or even the polymorph from Cern to set up for Earthshaker. And then I look over the Oni Warriors draft and I'm like, yeah, Vulcan's pretty good, but do you want to play Vulcan into a Pele? Probably not. Do you want to get slammed by an AMC immediately? Probably not there either. Sure, you're no longer affected by cripples, so Fields of Love a little bit more difficult to find value, but even the single target lockdown of a Nox might dissuade the Bolts from actually deciding to go towards that pick.
What is Hinduman doing in there?
Collusion. He's not allowed to be talking to these guys.
Yeah, what is he doing hanging out over there? Not sure what's going on. Wait, which booth is he? Oh, he's in the Warriors booth. Is he sitting in place of NeilMah? Well, I mean, I guess Hinduman is a support player, so potentially, but Xing and Soul, the final pickups there. Now, Soul typically has been a pick that BaRRaCCuDDa's gone to in the past for these mage ADCs, and then the Xing has been one of Awesome Jake's primary pickups here. So you imagine that this bottom 2 here is going to be in the dual lane for the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah, I mean, it's the BaRRa combo, right? So you got to assume that Soul is headed to the dual lane. It's interesting, right? Mage ADCs, especially more standard mages, should be able to outbox throughout the early, so you kind of want to put them where you'd like to establish some pressure. I think I would almost prefer to see the Soul go towards mid, just because you can match a little bit of the wave clear that AMC is bringing, and then you can still leverage the high kill pressure of a Xing and a Cern over in the duo lane. Also, Soul's a little bit safer, and assuming Pele is going to be in mid more often than not because of the mid 3v3, you might like having that CC immunity in the ultimate and disapparate as an escape tool a little bit more consistently. No, if I had to guess, and it is legitimately a guess, I'm guessing here, Cern, Xing duo, Artio solo, Soul in mid.
And a final pick for the Oni Warriors will be Amaterasu, who has been rising up a little bit over into that Soul lane meta. Been seeing specifically kind of just this auto attack warrior, a little bit of Bologna here and there has kind of been sprinkled in for some of the players like Variety and Nika have really kind of shined towards there. So how do you kind of feel about Amaterasu into this composition? Has that at CC Immune Ultimate to try and jump in there, has decent lockdown and chase. Do you think that this Amaterasu kind of kind of shores up maybe some of the weaknesses that the Oni Warriors draft had up until this point.
Yeah, my concern for the top 4 of the Oni Warriors was you don't have a standard front line. Pele is going to front line potentially with lifesteal if Soul Eater's the pickup, but otherwise not exactly a tank that's going to create space. Nox is a ranged initiator, so she's not really creating a whole lot of space for herself either. It's more so the threat of, hey, if you get hit by Shadow Lock, stand still, get slammed by my double hunter composition. So having Amaterasu be that dedicated front line with the dazzling offensive, some AoE CC to burn away those beads, maybe you find a little bit more value from the Shadow Lock now. Maybe the Fields of Love start to find their way home a little more often as well. I think pretty decent, but I would have almost preferred to see something a little bit tankier. Like, looking at the Bolts draft, if you could have just hand-plucked that Xing Shen and gave it over to the Oni Warriors, I may have preferred to see something like that just standard, I'm going to get in your back line, I'm going to burn some beads, and it's going to work every single time. There's pretty decent counterplay to dazzling offensive. Xing Shen can leap it, Bastet can leap it, Soul, Disapparate, can generally avoid some of that stuff as well. So there's a lot of onus on this Amaterasu to find value targets, and it's not going to be very easy to do.
Yeah, I think talking about lockdown and whatnot between these squads, I mean, the Olympus Bolts, you look at Xing Chen, that's the easiest beads burner that you have on that squad. If this Bastet can land ultimate, pretty easy target in that regard through, even this Artio to an extent. But do you think there's that same maybe level of beads pressure that the Oni Warriors have maybe on their composition? We know that anybody who gets hit by Nox is very likely, if they have beads, gonna burn at that point. But outside of their middle, I'm not really seeing a massive beads pressure kind of composition here. Do you worry about maybe some of the CC, maybe or lack thereof CC for the Oni Warriors as they move into the team fight stage?
Oni Warriors, not exactly. I feel like they're a little bit easier to burn out those beads, as you said. The Nox can do it for the most part. Whereas on the Olympus Bolts, a lot of your beads burning potential is tied to ultimates. The Bastet ultimate, the Cern ultimate, Xing Shen ultimate. You could say Artio is a strong beads burner, and you'd be right if you give the asterisk of as long as she's ahead. If Artio's allowed to walk you down, get point blank, and stun consistently and has enough damage to generate threat, you're probably going to beads it. But an Artio from even or from behind doesn't really threaten those relics. So her being the sole just, hey, I don't need to use my ultimate to burn your beads is a little bit concerning.
Well, we'll see who can take game number 1. Olympus Bolts, Oni Warriors will throw it over to Dave and Trelly to start things out.
That's right. Let's kick off our last half of the last phase of the year. My goodness, we are on a sprint towards the SWC, and it all starts here. One more round robin for each of the teams in the SPL to play. They'll play every other team one more time, and right back to it. The Bolts and the Oni Warriors, Trelly, going toe-to-toe with one another. In two teams that have kind of been on opposite trajectories as of late. The Bolts have had a nosedive here in Phase 3. The Oni Warriors seemingly have come to life towards the end of the year. But now it's time for the Oni Warriors to get over that regular season hump. They gotta beat the Olympus Bolts during a normal SPL set. Just been something that's eluded them for a little while now.
Yeah, certainly has been. It seems like the Bolts just have the Oni Warriors number, at least in these regular season sets, as you said. But I'm excited to see BaRRa on the Soul. This is a pick that I think has been sleeper for a while now. Just received some buffs, maybe a patch and a half ago, 2 patches ago at this point.
He loves this pick.
Yeah, extra scaling on Stellar Burst, both hits, and extra scaling on every shot of the ultimate. I think that Soul could be sleeper OP right now, and I'm glad that BaRRa, I mean, one of the prime players of this Soul pick, is going for it, as well as going for the Mannequin Scepter. That's going to help the early game tremendously, especially with Ven on an ADC in mid. Like, you should be just fine late game anyways. Like, you got plenty of shred through that regard. Having LASBRA on the Bastet, also looking good. So this is like traditional Bolts comps that we're seeing once again. So that tells me either A, they're trying to get back to their old ways, or B, they're feeling more confident. I like both of those things.
Yeah, I want to see how the brawl in the jungle is going to break out here in this game. Little dash forward from NeilMah, still level 1. So remember, goes back, gets a small purple from the Olympus Bolts, heads on back to lane, and so slightly behind as far as experience goes. And QvoFred on this Pele, LASBRA on the Bastet. I mean, what a dynamic jungle matchup we've got here. And LASBRA wants to make waves early. Beads can only help so much. Dardez uses them, doesn't matter. LASBRA's got the gap close and the damage. We're so used to the level 2 ganks being in duo lane, but LASBRA makes his way mid and makes the Oni Warriors pay.
Yeah, I mean, Cuvo was on that wave. He was over on the left side getting the Interceptor. LASBRA said, you can have the Scepter. I want first blood on the B. Gonna get the beads down as well. Massive plays here for LASBRA.
The beads.
And whenever, yeah, the bees on the beads. Whenever I see this matchup, I always look to the jungle, and it seems to me like LASBRA usually gets the better of Cuvo from the get-go. He always tries to get active. Qvo seems to try and play the left side of the map. LASBRA's ganking right, some sort of strat like that. And at the moment already, LASBRA coming out swinging. First blood in mid lane. And now Dardez beats it. BaRRaCCuDDa taking a lot of damage.
There takes the stun, but has to disapparate away. It is, you know, not only the picks, but I think you're spot on there. When you look at LASBRA and QvoFred, in the way that both of them play the jungle, LASBRA just feels very aggressive at times, in your face, very dynamic. QvoFred feels very, you know, rock solid, right? I mean, gonna spend some time farming. Eventually he's gonna hit the point where he feels more comfortable dashing in. No blink, got the beads. And so the Oni Warriors waiting for that point. But LASBRA never shies away from these early game ganks. We'll see what the Bastet gets done here over the next couple of minutes. Level 5 here shortly in that Hunters of Bast ultimate. Of course, very skill shot based. I mean, we'll go games, Trilly, where we don't see any of them connect.
Yep.
But with beads down on Dardez, might be a good opportunity for LASBRA here at level 5.
Yeah, certainly could be. But I guess in this situation, Dardez knows his beads are down for a solid 1 more minute, so probably not stepping up too far out of that situation. I'm looking over towards...
Are you calling him a tower boy?
I'm not calling him a tower boy per se, but he's playing smart at the moment. If he hides under tower when his beads are back up, then he's a tower boy.
Right now he's fine.
At the moment, he's just a smart mid laner.
Right.
We'll see in about 45 seconds or so if he's a tower boy. But I want to look over towards right lane as well. Nika going into the ultimate. QvoFred's going for the gank.
Oh, here's Qvo, level 5, right on time. Dazzling offensive and a dash in from QvoFred. That'll give number 1 over to the Oni Warriors. Baskin unable to escape the laning phase without a death. And getting a good start for Nika on such a in-your-face versatile pick like Amaterasu. Great start for the Oni Warriors.
Without fail, every single time Qvo is a part of a kill or near a kill, there will be a knuckle touch on the face cam. Like, we talk about it every single time, but it's always there, man. He's keeping the morale high.
What part of the world is knuckle touch versus fist bump from?
I guess both are fine. Fist bump, knuckle touch, whatever it is. Just keeping the vibes at an all-time high. Don't worry about that first blood. We got a kill onto our jungle. They got a kill onto their jungle. Shouldn't be any problem, but just pay attention to Qvo's face cam. Whenever he's a part of a kill, there will be a hand off the keyboard going over to bump knuckles with someone.
That's right. You know, I'm excited to see Qvo at Worlds, provided, you know, barring a catastrophic
a massive upset, yes.
Right, from one of the other SPL teams. At some point, it's got to be at some point an SEC team. I'm excited to see QvoFred and what the Oni Warriors are able to get done at Worlds. Any of these players that just play with high amounts of passion and energy and excitement in their game, and I mean, they just the players that let the energy of the crowd fuel them. So exciting to watch. Oni Warriors certainly one of those teams. Olympus Bolts at times could be that team as well. Got to get out of these games, though, and right now the Olympus Bolts, even after dropping a kill over in solo, built up about 1,000 gold of a lead here in the first 5 minutes of this game. So a pretty casual start, but both junglers, Trilly, already active. Maybe where you'd expect on one side, Dardez suffering the first death, the AMC somewhat immobile. The Basket a bit caught out. Now the Hunters have been left. Looks like won't see much over here on the left side unless one of the junglers makes their way over.
I mean, it seems like, you know, with that gank over in solo lane, Nika wasn't able to get too much, but now a rotation over to Vote. Gonna have to use the relics perfectly here. Get out of this one. Actually, no more aggression towards the left side of the map. More so focused on this purple buff, Ven, rotating over. This is what I was going to talk about. Ven was just 2 full levels up on Dardez, probably about a level and a half at this point, but with that first blood onto Dardez, was able to get a ton from it. Nika, of course, getting a little bit of pressure on Baskin. The teleport comes in, so you're not getting that much farm with that early kill. I think that's where most of that gold lead's coming from. Just great farming by Ven in the mid lane, and now we're seeing a little bit of a fight.
Ooh, gets the polymorph onto QvoFred. Does Ven. Building up that Devourer's Gauntlet. Stacking the Transcendence up is Dardez as well, so double stacking over in the mid lane. But a difference in mindset. Devourer's Gauntlet's made a bit of a comeback here recently. It was a lot of Transcendence for a while. Warlock Staff, of course, in the mid lane if you're playing a mage. Ven likes the Devourers here, and once you get it transformed, pretty nice power spike for the Cernunnos.
I can't believe that BaRRaCCuDDa and Vote have not backed yet. BaRRaCCuDDa just backed for the first time. They have just
get the full
so much
talent.
sustain. Yeah, they got the full Bancrofts. I imagine Vote's going to have the full Dev Gauntlets, possibly even a tier 1 at this point because it's been so long. Yeah, even
Wow.
the tier 1 light
You
blue.
are so smart, Trelly.
I mean, they just have so
you knew
much.
that down to 68 gold. He left base with 68 gold.
I
You knew
mean,
he had
if
enough
you're-
for Devos in tier 1. My
If you're
goodness.
back and it's 7 minutes, you better have extra gold, right? Because they have so much sustain built in. That's why neither of them thought to back. Nika is going to be aggressed on a bit by LASBRA here, but has the dazzling offensive to try and get out.
When will he use it? Are you going to wait for LASBRA to send out the Hunters of Bastards, QvoFred? Going to allow the trap to be set. Olympus Bolts have something else in mind, though, and it's not getting re-ganked by QvoFred, and so Nika survives just fine on the Amaterasu. And so Shogun's Kusari, typical first item on this Amaterasu. But it's been a while, Trelly. I mean, early Season 9, a lot of the Amaterasus, Bolognas of the world were really in the meta here. It was Shoguns. I think Golden Blade was really popular there for a little while on these picks. Do you think those types of items still have their place in the meta?
I think with the surge of auto attack style characters back into the meta, you know, with the double ADC composition that the Bolts have here, you know, getting Nika on like a Witchblade or a Frostbound, anything that's going to slow that attack speed as well as just facilitate this Amaterasu to try and outbox these Hunters in the early, or I guess attack damage carries in that sense, is probably going to be pretty solid. So I like the Shoguns, possibly Berserkers, and then into just more attack speed slow, that sort of thing. You can already see Awesome Jake is going for that same style of play. You're up against a double hunter, got the Sovereignty, has the horrific emblem, and with the Furious War from the Xing Chen, you know, just trying to focus out those auto attackers late game is always going to net you a lot of value. NeilMah dashing in, though.
Yeah, Neil's in mid. Good silence field out. Ven plays it wonderfully, though. Drops Wild Hunt and dashes away. And the Stinger will drop quietly. Beads used by Venenu over in the mid lane. So maybe regank potential for the Oni Warriors. But as we saw with Dardez, likely smart enough to back up beneath the tower for a little while. And I haven't talked much about this Nox just yet. NeilMah finally starting to make some rotations out of that duo lane. And honestly, similar to the Bolognas and the Amaterasus of the world, early in Season 9 feels like the Noxes and the E-set we still see in support every once in a while were really the support meta for a little bit of time when the Mask start was really great. And so I want to see what Neil is able to get done on Nox here in the current meta towards the end of Season 9.
Yeah, should be interesting. Did upgrade the cooldown med, the Cloak of the Ascetic, just trying to get that extra CDR and possibly just extra peel for the team. But as of recent, you know, has just been dashing in, trying to get some beads down, and that's pretty much all the Nox has netted thus far. Considering the fact that the Bolts are only up about 1,000, I don't think an immediate pull on a Pyromancer is going to be the call. Not even 1,000, just a little bit under it. So probably not going to see that immediate pull on a Pyromancer here in about 5 seconds, but because Ven's on this Cernunnos, because the Dev Gauntlets is stacked up, and you have to imagine enough auto attack damage coming from this mid laner, you got to make sure your ward vision is up to top speed here, because both of these objectives could go down so quickly. I mean, Gold Fury and Pyro, you don't have vision on it for about 5 seconds, and you're essentially down a couple thousand gold in that sense, as long as you're, you know, not over there in time. Because Nika's so far ahead, though, probably can rotate over to it just as quickly. I mean, Amaterasu so fast, has to teleport up in about 15 seconds. Shouldn't be that big of an issue as he ticks over to level 12.
I was wondering where anti-heal would get prioritized. A little bit of healing for both teams. Baskin goes Breastplate of Valor into the Divine Ruins. You'll have a little extra damage, a little penetration. Then, of course, the anti-heal, very important for Baskin to get early in this game. And when you're dealing with Cupid alone, feels strong. And the Bolts will love to have that on their side. Pyromancer taken by the Olympus Bolts. No real pushback from the Oni Warriors. Pretty quiet one to go down. We're not super concerned about fighting over the Pyromancer at this point in the game, but to your point, Trelly, when both teams have these double ADC comps, you have Shoguns for Nika to really prop up Dardez and Vote early in the game here. Surprised is LASBRA. Now he's been chunked down by QvoFred. Surprised maybe the Oni Warriors weren't hovering around that first Pyro.
Yeah, I think it was just a great time for Nika to back. And right at that moment, that's when the Bolts were like, okay, Nika's not here, doesn't have teleport up for about 15 seconds. Let's make our pull instantly. And they just had so much shred again from that Cernunnos, so they were able to burn through it and push that lead a little bit more in their favor. But I was going to say, yeah, BaRRaCCuDDa did go for the Book of Thoughts second in that slot. I'm curious if he's going to go for a more Book of the Dead style build or attack speed. At the moment, just full burst. And that is because of the scaling changes, I mean, buffs on Stellar Burst and Supernova. Maybe just trying to get as much value as possible on that pickup. There's going to be a lot of damage coming from this Soul. I mean, that's just...
That burst?
Yeah, that's the kind of burst
Oh
we're
my
talking
God.
about. Vote's got to watch out because he can't really match that at this point. But because there's still relics available and Vote's got the ultimate, I don't think too much danger, even with that rotation over from Awesome Jake.
Man, BaRRa can just exert pressure now in this lane. One big burst like that. And Vote's got to drop the health potions, pick them up just to sustain up a little bit of the damage that BaRRaCCuDDa was able to do. And maybe Awesome Jake poking his head over towards left, see if you can get the beads away from Vote, but Cupid was safe enough to just scurry on out of the lane. Now, it's so often with these magical ADCs, for a while, specifically I think with like Freya, the conversation was you got to put Freya behind, you've got to jump on Freya early, you cannot let Freya get to late game. Trelly, that did not seem to be the game plan here for the Oni Warriors up against BaRRaCCuDDa. Seems like outside of QvoFred making his way left early, they've been okay to just let BaRRaCCuDDa kick back and farm up.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that Soul late game is that instant win con, but Baskin actually does make the rotation over to left. Nika hovering as well. A possible Gold Fury attempt here for the Olympus Bolts, but Awesome Jake a little bit off the mark there with the Whirlwind of Rage and Steel. I imagine because the Soul laners rotate over, it was an attempt, but immediately just called off. Not going to be going for this 13-minute Gold Fury. Instead, rotating back over to solo lane is Nika, so should be stealing away some farm in the process. If this isn't going to be a pull, the Olympus Bolts are just going to be letting their solo laner get behind. Finally, they're going to start a little bit of a pull. Yeah, the ADCs are on it.
And it's the Olympus Bolts with positional priority. Vote dashes away. Hunters of Ast, no good. NeilMah with a bit of lockdown onto LASBRA, and the Bolts have confirmed the Gold Fury. QvoFred and Nika into the back line as QvoFred trades out his life. LASBRA on the fadeaway gets it, but a dazzling offensive, and Nika begins his warpath. The rage building. A dash on in, another for Nika, and it's a double kill for the Amaterasu.
That's going to be a good answer back after that Fury goes down. LASBRA and Ven going to be gone for quite some time. But what do the Oni Warriors do with that? Can they group up and push for tier 1? No, it looks like Jake is more so concerned with trying to get some relics off of Dardez. Not going to be grabbing anything else in the meantime, just trying to farm up. But that was a great chase down. The Olympus Bolts still certainly getting the better of it gold-wise, being able to trade out there. You know, getting the Gold Fury, pushing that gold lead almost up to 2K, but I do think Nika slowly but surely climbing ahead. Yeah. I mean, level 15, 2-0 on this Amaterasu, whereas Baskin's level 13, you know, can't really match that pressure, can't really close gap quite the same. Definitely looking good here for the Oni Warriors if they're able to fight through this Amaterasu, but definitely a good call by the Bolts to make sure to go for that pull. They had superior burst, and they used it.
Like, Amaterasu with Nika, it at times feels like one of those types of picks that you gotta have a game plan when you're going up against it, right? I mean, it's hard. The odds of banning out Amaterasu right now, limited, but the type of pick that Nika can take a game over with if given the opportunity. Huh, and NeilMah actually gets grabbed and pulled by LASBRA, but dropped right back down. I'm not sure that's who LASBRA was aiming for.
That was definitely an accident, yeah.
Ended up working out for the Oni Warriors, and NeilMah will shrug it off and be okay. Right, but this 2-level lead for Nika, level 16. Everyone else in the game 15 or lower, and it's only BaRRaCCuDDa's at 15. Feels like the more involved you can get this Amaterasu, the better. And a really nice opportunity maybe for the Oni Warriors around this Pyromancer here in another 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, certainly could be the call. I thought that was the call last time because Nika still did have that pressure when Pyro spawned in about 10 minutes, but just a great time to back, and unfortunately, more specifically, the Bolts were able to capitalize on that back. So I imagine Nika not going back to base anytime soon, just picked up that mid-Guardian mail, which is going to help out with those auto attackers. It might put some pressure over towards that Pyro because it's going to spawn back in here soon, as it did. And they even have the vision as well, so the Oni Warriors are not going to let that one slip through their fingers.
So, I mean, you always end up having to wonder then, Trelly. You've got the sort of looming threat. Level 16, Amaterasu, got some good itemization online. We'll hold this thought while Pyromancer gets grabbed and picked up by the Oni Warriors. Good poke damage out of Dardez on the back foot there. Awesome Jake still lurking. Won't even get the root over on NeilMah. So what does the game plan have to be against something like an Amaterasu? Feels like Nika's got kind of free, get into the backline card, you dash forward, you dazzling offensive, and he's got the build to back it up. Olympus Bolts maybe, hey, let's force the issue somewhere where Nika's not. Attempting to get some damage here on this tier 1. But a stinger out from Dardez will slow it down.
Yeah, that was a little bit too scary for Awesome Jake. Once the stinger came through, had to go into the Whirlwind of Rage's Steel just to make sure that he could get out of trouble there. I don't think at the moment you're trying to kill Nika. I mean, like you said, level 17 at the moment does have the itemization to back up this tankiness. You're sort of waiting for the Dazzling Offensive to get down. Hopefully you can burn beads, and then the lockdown's good. QvoFred, though, is going to be in a ton of trouble. Ult body blocked, and he's going down instantly.
Or, yeah, you force the Oni Warriors into a 5v4. You kill off the Amaterasu's teammates elsewhere on the map. And now it's just back to farming. And so 30 seconds or so. Not much activity to be done here for the Oni Warriors. And I actually think a relatively proactive play from the Bolts to knock down some damage on that tier 1 over in mid. And sets up some gold for themselves there in the future. So a bit of an overextension from QvoFred, or maybe just a better chase down from the Olympus Bolts. And Trelly really at this point in the game maybe felt like what the Bolts needed. Now it's such an interesting spot, and we keep referencing back to this. Feels like the Oni Warriors have been the team kind of driving things. That last little two-man team fight went well. The Pyromancer goes to the Oni Warriors. Olympus Bolts are closing in on 2,000 gold in the lead here. All the neutral farm, while the objectives have been dropping, has just been going to the Bolts. And so while on paper, and the movement around the map has looked good for the Warriors recently, all the intangibles have been going to the Bolts.
Yeah, with that Gold Fury as well as the first Pyromancer, I think the Bolts have built up a nice little cushion for themselves, despite the fact that Oni Warriors are able to capitalize on that second Pyro. But Primal Fury spawning back in here shortly, and I think this is really a moment where the Oni Warriors should be able to try and form some form of defense. BaRRaCCuDDa opted to go into the Telkine's ring first, so doesn't have the penetration online, more so focused on damaging these squishy targets. Didn't go for the Demonic Grip. Doesn't have that penetration. If Nika gets to BaRRaCCuDDa, not going to be doing too much. I suppose that's Ven's job, right? Executioner, kin size, Awesome Jake. Gonna have to sprint out of trouble here, but it looks like Cubo's blinking in.
Oh, Awesome Jake eats the stinger. Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, CC immunity. Only shrugs off the lockdown, but not the damage, and it's Nika on a killing spree. Now Primal Fury pulled and burnt by the Oni Warriors quickly, and Charlie, feels like the Bolts didn't get a chance to answer. It felt like Awesome Jake got picked, and the Oni Warriors simply able to win the 5v4.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like the Bolts wanted to get aggressive at that Fury, but was not the case. And look at the rotations over. I mean, Vote is leaving lane as well. Dardez heading over towards the right side of the map. I imagine the Oni Warriors are looking for a possible chance towards that Fire Giant, but it looks like Vote got distracted by the Oracles and is just going to go back over to left. Either way, Jake a little bit too far. Nico with the teleport in behind. Closing gap very easily. You got to watch out for whenever that stinger comes through. You become a lot less tanky, even with Sovereignty and Breastplate. You're able to get blown through very quickly, especially with a good follow-up there. I think QvoFred closing gap with the blink, making sure there was no easy way to escape. And you got to remember, Nika's also buffing the whole team with some movement speed or some damage aura, depending on which stance he's in with that first ability. So you might think you're safe. You might think you got enough tank stats to your name. With a draft that the Oni Warriors have here, a 1-2 step too far, you could be caught out just like that.
Nika on a 3-0-1 start here, affected all 4 of the kills that the Oni Warriors have. And it's not often you see a lot of that. I mean, it feels like solo lane. I mean, maybe in this pace of game, it's a little bit more likely, but often, the solo laners are triple zeros and all the fighting's been happening elsewhere, and then eventually they get involved. No, Nika's been at the forefront of all of it, including this Fire Giant pull by the Oni Warriors. LASBRA in range, but LASBRA unable to steal. Jumps back out, but death is on his doorstep. And the Oni Warriors have dealt the killing blow to not only the FG, but to LASBRA to add one more.
Yeah, they were able to burn through that very quickly. BaRRaCCuDDa on split push duty didn't even try to make the rotation over and grab the tier 1 in the process. But the Oni Warriors are going to grab that over on right and probably a free tier 2 as well. Nika is going to defend that tier 2 just to make sure Barra's not going to grab any extra farm. What will be the wraparound you play here? I see Baskin's positioning. Probably is trying to grab a relic or something. There's no way that just Jake and Ven are trying to get aggressive here. I mean, the 3v4 is not going to be your best call, especially with Cuvo close by. But just great peace of mind. They had great burn on that Fire Giant, and the Bolts were too little too late. LASBRA dies for his sins and wasn't able to confirm anything.
Baskin in trouble. No, tanky enough. Awesome Jake sent back to the awaiting arms is NeilMah, but NeilMah lives, and a dropped ball by the Olympus Bolts. Would have been great to get one of those FG buffs down, because that's what's been happening to the Bolts. It feels like an individual pick here or there has given a Fury, now a Pyromancer, and an FG over to the Oni Warriors. And we haven't seen how strong the Bolts are in a full 5v5 in a little while because of these individual picks. Now the Oni Warriors, Charlie, they go back, they spend their gold. They are in power position here. Already one exposed Phoenix, but maybe the tier 2 over on tier 1 and tier 2 on left, the target to look at. I'm just not sure where the Bolts go from here. I mean, not getting picked prior to these objectives has got to be priority 1. That gives you some type of chance to 5v5. We just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and I'm a little surprised that BaRRaCCuDDa held on a Supernova that long there. I mean, Awesome Jake does get a nice ult. Possibly thought if I drop it here, you know, Neil's just going to ult or dash out and not land. But so much damage came through onto NeilMah, and then the Supernova after the fact, a little bit off the mark. Wasn't able to connect with anyone. And then you'll lose that pick onto NeilMah. So not the greatest call, but I guess you've lost one tier 2 tower so far. The gold lead is not so outlandish that you can't decide to defend these tier 2s over on left if you so choose. But with the positioning of Baskin, with Ben and Jake still in mid, it seems to me like this tier 2 over and left is also going to be an afterthought. It's just going to be going down too quickly. So yeah, the Oni Warriors are going to be able to push that gold lead even further for the time being. A minute 30 left on this Fire Giant. No way they feel confident enough to go for the Phoenix. So probably grabbing that tier 2 in mid. And then I imagine the full reset, spend up some of that gold, and set up for the next one. Your lead is big, but it's not go under Phoenix lead just yet.
You got to be careful, though, if you're the Oni Warriors. So you have 3 sets of beads. Always a nice start. But LASBRA, with that pull, can immediately flip down any type of siege. So with a minute on the Fire Giant buff, I don't know, a lot of the aggressive teams you might see still just throw one attempt at one of these Phoenixes, just consider it. But to your point, Trelly, not feeling confident enough just yet. And why not? I mean, you've been behind about 2,000 or so gold for the first 15 or so minutes of this game if you're the Oni Warriors. You finally built up this massive lead. Let's go back and actually solidify it. You know, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 of that gold lead still in the back pocket waiting to be spent by the Oni Warriors. Maybe a Gold Fury expands out a little bit further. And we were just talking about not getting picked out. And that's what Ven is in the threat of here. He's blown up by the Oni Warriors. I'm not sure the Bolts were stepping up to this Gold Fury anyway, but now that decision has been made.
Yeah, I don't understand that call at all. I mean, the Gold Fury was the only objective up. You knew Fire Giant's not going to be back up for a bit.
Look at what the Warriors are now able to do.
Yeah, and now they've got the confidence to say, hey, yeah, Fire Giant's gone in 5 seconds, but we might as well step up and try something with the time being. They lost a few ultimates on that pick. Vote and Neil not going to have access to their ultimates here, but I do imagine a soft push towards the Fire Giant wouldn't be the worst call, and that was all they went for. So now backing up to grab possibly the red buff and the Gold Fury in the process. At the very least, Ven will be back for FG, which is up in 50 seconds, but you did lose your beads in the process, and that hurts your team fight significantly. I mean, without beads, Ven can't really step up. NeilMah hits one good grab, and or Vote drops the ultimate. You're losing your Cernunnos once again before the fight begins.
Well, look, and look, the Oni Warriors are 8,000 or so gold ahead. The Olympus Bolts had a chance there. 6,000 of that 8,000 gold is just now getting spent on actual itemization. And so maybe a pick onto Ven and backpedaling just a bit. The Olympus Bolts maybe still didn't feel comfortable enough, even with the gold on map at the moment. Feeling all right. So now it's into the next FG. You're at 25 minutes. The odds of this one being enhanced pretty limited. And the Olympus Bolts still trying to escape the getting picked bug. I mean, you want to go into this fight in a full 5v5, give yourself a chance. And an overextension here or there has really stuffed them at every single turn here in game number 1. Oni Warriors immediately onto the FG pole, and they are burning it quickly. Why wouldn't they? They've got 2 Shoguns and double ADCs. But it is dropped, still looking for that pick.
Yeah, I can see LASBRA and Qvo doing a bit of a dance behind the Fire Giant. Nika already playing zone duty. Remember, Ven doesn't have the beads here.
Nika uses the dazzling offensive, gets a stun onto Venenu, and Nika has just controlled the backline. The 1-2 punch of Nika and QvoFred. Simply too much. A decent stun onto a few members of the Oni Warriors, but the Olympus Bolts left limping away from this fight. And how about the initiation from the Oni Warriors?
I mean, and that all, I believe, is set up from Ven not having those beats. I mean, Nika's able to walk up, hit the dazzling offensive, get a beautiful stun. Immediately, Qvo's got the follow-up. Volcanic Lightning. The Aegis can't come through until the stun's gone. And then we get to see a tremendous trebuchet battle over in left lane as well. Who knows who's going to be winning that one? But on the right side, now I can tell you who's going to be winning. Oni Warriors 5 strong, and BaRRA and Jake just have to give this one up.
These death timers are long. I mean, another 20 or so seconds on Baskin, 15 on Ven. You could see, I was thinking both Phoenixes right in mid drop. a slight push forward from the Oni Warriors made me wonder if we're going for the end. Nika dashes in, chunks down BaRRaCCuDDa. It's an afterthought at this point, though. BaRRaCCuDDa and Jake double stunned, and the Phoenix crumbles. Oni Warriors get right in mid, and they do it quickly. They'll back, they'll spend, and Shelly, the Oni Warriors have a real good look at game one.
Yeah, they certainly do. That gold lead's climbing over 10K, about 12K at this point. So now they should be going towards what I can only imagine is a full-on reset. Considering that fact, Pyromancer goes down. They're going to be climbing up. Probably a couple more itemization choices that could be coming through here in the short moments. I mean, Vote can finally upgrade that death toll, or could sell it for a dominance. We've seen that a few times. Or just get the Death's Temper for more attack speed towards that Silver Branch. It's just scary to think the Oni Warriors are going to get even stronger here, whereas the Olympus Bolts, sure, they've got a bit of gold to spend, but certainly not getting these upgrades, and actually will be Vote just selling the Death Toll for the dominance. That extra penetration, Awesome Drake and Baskin are not going to be standing in the forefront of these fights for much longer with that itemization. I mean, just so much pen. It's going to be very hard to be a tank up against this composition.
Yeah, I mean, it's been brutal to be anyone on the Olympus Bolts. I mean, think about how easy it's been for Nika and Qvo to initiate. Nika simply walks forward. If the CC is about to connect, I'll just dazzling offensive, and I'll find a stun on the other end of it more times than not. And Ven was the recipient of that last time. It just feels like the Bolts haven't been able to then match that on the other side of the team fight. It's been very difficult for LASBRA and Baskin to find the same type of early team fights that the Oni Warriors front line have been able to do on their side. And so really at this point, if you're the Oni Warriors, Charlie, you got to imagine you're just waiting for these fire minions rather to waltz their way into the base. And then you've got a pretty simple shot at this left side Phoenix here. It might be time for desperation play from the Olympus Bolts here, really hoping that your damage can connect in the right place.
Oh!
And it does, and it's Nika who's caught out. I see a down Hunters of Bast, and I see one dead Nika, and I have to imagine that's what's happened here. The Olympus Bolts do grab left Phoenix, but they lose their left Phoenix, but they are able to pick up a kill onto Nika.
Yeah, unfortunately for the Bolts, I don't think that kill did much at all, right? You got Nika dead. He didn't use any relics. The left Phoenix still goes down, and it's not like you can go up and push Fire Giant with that time, so not going to be netting too much. At the very least, I suppose, the Oni Warriors, maybe if they were, you know, back and forth on should we go for the end after this Phoenix, should we look for the fight, no longer have that option. So at the very least, they can back up for a bit. But Nika's able to teleport back in 20 seconds if they so choose. An awesome Jake stepping right into some trouble. Vote actually dashes in, but immediately shredded through. He's gone.
No, it's happening again. I mean, we had a pick on Nika a second ago, but it's another horrible time to get picked out. You still have 4 members of the Oni Warriors with FG. And if you're the Bolts, now your duo lane is just gone. It has been a game one of missteps here for the Olympus Bolts. They've had moments
Teleport.
where early on their objective confirm looked great, and I figured the Bolts were off to a really good start here in game one, but just have not been able to catch their footing. And the Oni Warriors have called them at every turn. There is simply too much damage and too much gold in the back pocket of the Oni Warriors, who take game number one.
And knuckle touches all around from QvoFred. I mean, from the get-go, right? You saw early aggression from this Pele. You know, maybe just the first blood onto Dardez. Besides that, Qvo was ready to get active, looking over towards Nika specifically. Once that Amaterasu started rotating in, those objectives that the Bolts were able to grab didn't really matter anymore. I mean, the fights going over to the Oni Warriors consistently, and they just had so much shred. The AMC Cupid 1-2 punch was just too much to handle. We saw many times where Awesome Jake stepped up, said, I've got sovereignty and breastplate, I can live.
I can do whatever.
Immediately shredded through. The protections, they didn't exist anymore. Just a very hard comp to go into, especially from behind.
Again, I think if you're the Bolts and you're looking at the first 15 minutes of this game, you're thinking, we control the early Gold Fury. We lost a couple deaths on the back end of that, but the Pyromancers looked okay early on as well. Come team fight and grouping time, the Oni Warriors just looked stronger here in game number one. Can the Oni Warriors beat the Olympus Bolts during the regular season. We'll find out if they can get it done in game number 2 right after this.
Dardez wins.
It's been raining for days now, been running like a child. Can't feel the cold, well I'm lost here with you, lost in the woods. Lost as I should. I barely see the sky now, we're safe under the trees. You tell me about your secrets and I'm falling madly, you catch me right.
Game number 1 to start the day out ends up going over to the Oni Warriors, able to find their success against the Olympus Bolts. And if you want to support the Warriors, the Bolts, or any of these teams over in TSPL, whether it be your favorite team or if you just think a jersey looks cool, well, thanks to our friends over at Skulls, you can pick one of these jerseys up and support your favorite SMITE Pro League team. Go over to shop.hi-rezstudios.com/SPL or smiteproleague.com/ oh, actually, I completely forgot what the other link was. So use the one that's right there. Shop.smiteproleague.com was the other link out there. So thank you so much to Skulls for providing the jerseys for our players and for the fans at home who want to support their favorite teams out there. And in this game, and the team that comes out on top for game number 1 is the Oni Warriors. But as mentioned, I mean, at the very beginning of the game, the Olympus Bolts are able to get some good picks out there, able to find some good objective play around the Pyromancers, around these Gold Furies. But Mifflin, once we started kind of moving into this mid-game, once we started moving towards the 20-25 minute mark, the Olympus Bolts team fights kind of started to fall apart, and really it's the Oni Warriors who were able to pull themselves out there. Sure, Nika getting picked definitely slowed the game down for an extra moment there, but at the end, the Oni Warriors team fight at the end of the day was what ends up winning them out.
Yeah, I liked what we had seen from the Oni Warriors in response to the Olympus Bolts' attempted proactive plays. We talked about it briefly on the desk. How are the Olympus Bolts going to burn beads? Can they do it consistently? The answer is yes, if you're willing to dedicate Xing Chen's entire life to doing it, right? Because every single time we saw him go in with a whirlwind and raging steel, it was an immediate turnaround. If he did burn someone's beads, nice, but at the cost of one, considering how spaced out some of these fights were, didn't exactly pan out in favor of the Olympus Bolts. The Oni Warriors very smart on their turn and burn, and the dive potential of this Amaterasu rung true multiple times. It was really around this fight where I thought to myself, man, Nika is just going unchecked in so many of these engagements, allowed to do so much damage in that back line a little bit quicker than it was returned to him. Otherwise, I'd argue the Olympus Bolts in this match kind of show a little bit of the weaknesses that we had seen from them in the past, and that once they start to fall behind, they don't exactly have a cohesive way back in. LASBRA attempts to fire Giant Steel, trying to reprise his performance from the previous set up against the Oni Warriors. That doesn't land, and then from there, it felt like the Olympus Bolts lost a bit of their direction. The defense attempts weren't quite there. The Oni Warriors essentially get to stack up a whole lot, a dragon's hoard of gold from collecting these towers without really having a whole lot of opposition from the Bolts. And by the time we started to get into those Phoenix defenses, the Warriors were just too far ahead.
Yeah, and it really does kind of feel like the Bolts, and I think you put it perfectly, which is once they start to fall behind, they kind of lose that guidance, they lose that direction. They're not really sure where they should try and maybe find those wins again, whether it be an objective steal from LASBRA or an attempt at an objective steal at the very least, or maybe just reforming and kind of recuperating themselves and getting themselves mentally back into the game. A bit of a rough one in game number 1 for the Bolts. We'll see if they can at least bounce it back for game number 2. And I mean, what do you expect? It's AMC, man. AMC always does crazy damage. At this point, I'm surprised if an AMC isn't top damage in the lobby, even over some of the solo lanes that we've seen.
I'm surprised that the Oni Warriors ever find themselves in a position where they're allowed to play the AMC. I realize that Dardez is very capable of playing a good chunk of the meta picks. He'll play the Vulcans, he'll play the Morgans, but he's different on that pick. And the Oni Warriors look different when they're allowed to play around that AMC. The entirety of their draft strategy and play on field strategy is about facilitating Dardez on that hypercarry. You get pressure in the side lanes, so you can't look at them, because if you do dedicate time to Dardez, you're just getting absolutely destroyed on the sides of the map. I'd get him off the pick. And it's not a Dardez exclusive thing either.
Oh, no.
AMC is controlling the entirety of the draft phase at every single match in the SPL right now. Every single team is capable of playing that pick at an incredibly high level, but it's slightly more egregious when you're letting Dardez get it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking players like Dardez, BMT, probably the next one for me to come to mind for players that probably shouldn't be allowed to have this pick. And we'll see if the AMC does make it through the picks and bans of game number 2 as we get ready to jump right into those ones. Maybe see if the Olympus Bolts either ban that one or potentially first pick it for themselves and take it away from the Oni Warriors. Could always be an option there, but as the first bans start coming through, the Morgan, probably Dodgy, going to be at least round out those top 2. Last time around, though, it was the Ymir, and at this point, would you rather let NeilMah take the Ymir or maybe even potentially grab that one for yourselves, let that Ymir through, and ban this AMC? Or do you think that maybe NeilMah's Ymir is just that scary that you just kind of ban it away?
I don't think that.
No?
I don't think that at all. And it seems like the Olympus Bolts have decided to adjust their analysis and threat assumption levels around that pick, too. NeilMah is very good at Ymir. NeilMah is very good at support, and he's going to play similarly on aggressive supports regardless of which one it is. If it's the Bacchus, the Xing, the Ymir, he's going to get in your face. He's going to be annoying. I think taking the AMC away, just infinitely more valuable, right? NeilMah's got plenty of picks that he can go towards that are essentially going to fill the same role that Ymir would have. So I like this adaptation from the Bolts.
So it will be a Cernunnos first pick after an AMC replacing that Ymir ban. Opposite side, no changes in there. Umoja, Hades, and BaRRaCCuDDa all banned by the Oni Warriors. A couple of shots towards that support role, also a little bit in towards the solo lane for Baskin, but will be Ymir that did get banned away last time picked up, and gotta imagine Cupid probably right behind it, and it will be locked in for the Oni Warriors. So a very early duo lane draft for the Warriors team.
Very scary duo lane at that. The lockdown potential, the early first blood potential as well, is incredibly high. The Olympus Bolts support, Awesome Jake, has struggled in the last couple of sets to survive the first 3 to 4 waves against heavy kill pressure compositions. Get hit by a heart bomb, even if it's not a stun, the slow should be enough to line up the Glacial Strike. Line up the Glacial Strike, you're slowed again, you're stuck, you're largely immobile on the majority of supports that Jake has been going towards, at least for the first couple of levels. If I'm the Olympus Bolts right now, I'm saying, Jake, take it slow over here. Let's get to level 5, then let's start to try and make some plays. Nox is a pick that I think should be able to self-peel relatively well. You get that Shadow Lock at second level. Just lock him down, keep him away from you, backpedal the entire time. It's a pick that should be able to survive the first 3-4 waves with relative ease.
So Cernunnos, Nox, and Pele, the pickups for the Bolts. So making sure to grab something for LASBRA a little bit earlier on, since last time around the top 2 was a Cupid Pele for the Oni Warriors. So a little bit of a shift up, at least in the drafting, is now opted for an Anhur to be picked up, going over to the mid, something that Dardez loves playing in that mid lane. Seems he's going to be playing it one more time, Mifflin. How you feel about the Anhur mid?
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly my favorite. It is just not exactly the highest pressure pick that you could get. It's going to have decent fight potential, but scaling into the late game, not the highest. If you want Dardez to be that late game win condition, Anhur falls off pretty hard. So it could be the Oni Warriors try and shift their strategy and draft pressure all the way across the board, blitzkrieg the Olympus Bolts around these objectives, and Anhur is good in that situation. But if we're to talk about Anhur holistically, he's a lot better now than he was 2 patches ago. Devourer's Gauntlet synergizes well with Anhur's passive, which means that he can get aggressive a lot earlier on. Something Zapman had brought up during the roundtable was that Anhur is a god that wants to get aggressive, wants to jump on you, but generally when it was Transcendence Anhur meta, it was, I jump on you, I might not finish off that kill, and now I have to go back to base because I leapt in, and now I've got no HP left. Now that you're allowed to build Devourer's Gauntlets on him, you can resustain on wave, try again. So it gives you a little bit more leeway on execution throughout the early portions of the match. And it is still very good around like red buff invades and things like that. But the concern is, in every single game so far between the Bolts and the Oni Warriors in this set and the previous, the games have generally gone the distance. Like it's been 25, 26, 30, 35 minutes, somewhere in there. Anhur really starts to fall off compared to the rest of the Hunter cast.
Well then, for the second wave of bans, Freya and Bologna by the Oni Warriors, Amaterasu and Susano by the Olympus Bolts. So taking away a couple of solo lane picks, some of those auto attack warriors in that regard, which can at least maybe help alleviate against some of these double hunter compositions that we have been seeing picked up by these squads. So now with the Oni Warriors back through, I was wondering if they were going to wait on QvoFred's pick, but they're going to jump right to it immediately. Mercury, the lock-in for the Warriors, and to me, this definitely tells that they're wanting to push a little bit more towards that later game, at least in the jungle regard, Miff.
Yeah, honestly, I forgot QvoFred was also a late-game win condition at times. So used to seeing Dardez be that guy for this team. Now this draft is starting to make a little bit more pressure, or make a little bit more sense through pressure. Cupid, Ymir, good luck beating that in lane, right? They should be able to invade purple buff on their own. Even with the jungler showing up, it'd be a scary situation to want to fight into them. Anhur, very strong in his 1v1 for the first 15 or so levels, so he should be able to generate pressure on the center of the map. Wouldn't be surprised if the Oni Warriors grab Nika something that can really generate pressure as well, because you want a situation where Cuvo can just sit in the jungle and farm. You want this guy building his Golden Blade, slamming back camps, red buffs, green buffs. You want him collecting everything on the map so that once he does get to the late game, good luck dealing with this Mercury. Has decent 1v1 potential into the Pele, can 1v1 a Cern pretty easily as well, so long as he's got that beads available, and just that wild X factor of, yo, I Sonic Boom from all the way across the map, and all of a sudden it's a numbers advantage, can really help out the Oni Warriors.
Olympus Bolts still need 2 more picks for themselves, potentially mid, depending where the Cernunnos goes, and solo. Solo lane at least
like
answer
that.
with that. Odin to fight up against the 4 gods that have been drafted against the Warriors. Only the Anhur able to naturally escape that cage on his own volition. So Phantom Shell definitely have to be on the table now for the Oni Warriors. And the Olympus Bolts will go back to the Soul this time around. Now, whenever we think of Odin, I kind of think of Odin almost in that similar regard of Naja. You drop down the cage, you want something big to deal damage in that area. Do you think that the Bolts have that kind of play style? Do you think they have that kind of style where if somebody is locked down the cage, they've got the burn potential to kill the person inside the cage?
I think so. The Nox silence field, pretty large. I mean, it's not the size of the cage, but you lock down a general, like, what, 40-50% of the area. Pele's knock-up, pretty strong in that situation. Cern ultimate, the exact same size of the cage. You can line that one up relatively easily. But why I like the Odin is how it interacts with the Mercury. It's telegraphed when the Bolts want to start a fight. It's going to be a blink Ring of Spears or a jump-in Ring of Spears, something like that. And now's its go time. Like, we're brawling out. Someone's going to die now. And Mercury, for the most part, on these late-game team fights, likes to play the edge of the engagement. You watch how he positions, generally around Fire Giant dances, Gold Fury dances. We'll see the Mercury hovering in mid or hovering in the duo lane, waits for the fight to start, says, okay, I'm going to Sonic Boom, disrupt your DPS. Can't do that when Ring of Spears is on the map. It's a complete separator. So it's going to be a lot more difficult now for QvoFred to find opportunities to get involved in the engagement. He has to trust and rely on his team to be able to survive that Odin cage. Then the Mercury can get involved. Then he can start rotating in towards the fight. Or if QvoFred gets a little bit trigger happy with his ultimate, goes in first, you don't want the Merc getting locked down by a Ring of Spears. Very difficult to peel him out. This could be a composition now that the Bolts have picked up with how these team fights are going to roll through, where the Oni Warriors need to concern themselves with not just one Phantom Shell, but maybe even 2.
Well, with an Osiris is the final pickup. It is a god that with an ultimate can get out of the cage. If he has his passive up, can also just walk out of the cage in that regard. So at least some escape for this team. But we're looking at double Hunter, 4 physical comp. There's not an AMC on that side to have that natural shred with the form of the Stinger. Do you think that this Osiris, or just in general, this draft for the Oni Warriors, is maybe a little bit more difficult for them to kind of fight and find success in those late-game team fights against the draft the Bolts have?
This is a hard-to-execute composition, man. Physical defense is just going to find a whole lot of value here. You don't have the standard burst potential that we've seen from, like, Dardez in the past. When you think of Dardez picks, Anhur does come to mind, but not nearly as recently. Now it's the AMC, the Morrigan, the Vulcan, and they all bring massive, like, 4-digit damage at a moment's notice. Anhur doesn't exactly do that exact same thing. And with the Olympus Bolts having the opportunity to just straight up build defense, it could be very difficult to play around this. I expect the Oni Warriors to try and bring the fight early. I expect them to play around this Anhur, play around this dual lane, try and establish a lead and get in toward these objectives. If you pull a lead fast enough, it doesn't matter like that you're a 4 physical. It really doesn't. You could just get your damage a little bit quicker than the defense comes online, and it's pretty easy to snowball from that position. They've got a lot of threat on objectives. The structures will fall down very quickly if the Oni Warriors find a lead. Those towers will melt. If they find a lead, the Gold Fury, the Pyro, Fire Giant, all will melt, especially with what is essentially a triple Hunter composition if you want to count Mercury as like a melee Hunter around these objectives. But finding that lead against a team that is generally willing to play reactive, as the Olympus Bolts are, it's going to be pretty difficult to do.
Yeah, I think you're maybe right to bring up kind of the play around these objectives out there. With this Odin, it's going to make it difficult for this team to get in. Could even make it difficult to get out. So Phantom Shell was originally kind of, okay, maybe 1 Phantom Shell. Now maybe a second one, even throwing in with this Osiris. So let's see kind of where the Oni Warriors decide to put their relic choices up there, where they decide to kind of find their success around these team fights. Early Objectives was the name of the game for the Olympus Bolts. It found them some success there. But the Oni Warriors were able to kind of come back towards that late game. If the Bolts keep up that early pressure, find those early objectives, could be a good game for them. Can the Bolts bounce back in game number 2, or are the Oni Warriors going to find that first regular season win up against them? To find out, we got to jump into game number 2 with Dulcin and Trelly.
That's right. The Oni Warriors would love to begin their run-up to the SMITE World Championships here at the back end of phase number 3 with a 2-0 win over the Olympus Bolts. Exactly the opposite for the Bolts. They need to get themselves to a game 3 here, desperate to start building up some momentum here in the last phase of the year here in Season 9. Bolts versus Warriors at least one more time. NeilMah and Jake will meet. Now, a lot of this comes down to, I think, Neil early on in this game here, Trelly.
Yeah.
Are we getting the 0-5 NeilMah Ymir game, or are we getting something a bit more clean and consistent? Might set the pace in the first few minutes of this game.
Yeah, I think that is the question, because looking at the Bolts draft, much easier to execute on, as Mifflin was highlighting. There's no, I mean, I guess besides Awesome Jake's kit, there's not many ways you can waste your abilities, not many ways you can waste an engage. And NeilMah is always going to be a pretty solid target. I mean, this immobile Guardian at the forefront of the fight, not going to be easy to try and escape from, or I guess try to disengage from these fights. So, you know, it really just depends on how the rest of the Oni Warriors are playing around Neil. But I do think it's not going to be easy. You know, I like what the Olympus Bolts did in picks and bans to give themselves this composition. And I think, I know I talked about Soul being slept on and it didn't look too hot in game number 1, but I also think that Odin could bring something special to the table, considering the fact that there's not too much overwhelming amounts of shred on the side of the Oni Warriors.
To give credit to BaRRa, high damage numbers on the Soul by the end of game number 1.
Oh, yeah.
Felt like the fighting was never really around the Soul. Once in a while, I was able to move in, poke out some damage, but that pace of game simply just not in BaRRa's favor. And in the positioning on the map specifically, was just not where the Soul was playing from. So Odin v Osiris over in the solo lane, but how about our mid lane battle in this one, Trelly? We got Dardez on the Anhur up against Ven on Cernunnos one more time. The Anhur, a wild card. We see that in the dual lane every once in a while, not often. Did not expect to see it here in game 2.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking that one of the best Anhur players in the world is just like a mid laner, you know. But Dardez loves playing this pick. I even see him playing it in ranked. You know, he likes Anhur. He likes the impales. He likes the way the kit flows. And I think when you're feeling confident on a pick, that trumps meta, right? Like even if like, oh, I could have picked AMC here, which of course he couldn't. If you're feeling crisp and you know your ults are hitting, your impales are hitting, then yeah, pick the Anhur. So I'll have to see. This might have been one of those picks where Dardez is like, I know I'm going to be on point this game. Let's just run it. And so far, I mean, you're 2 minutes in, can't really see much from this start, but I imagine there was a reason he went towards this pick. He just feels confident on it, and he knows he should be landing those hits.
Well, it's a good start for the Oni Warriors dual lane. We've talked about Neil early in the game on the Ymir. Every once in a while, will fall prey to a couple of early kills. Would love to help get Dardez this early red buff. But on the flip side, maybe that's where the Olympus Bolts choose to put a bit of their pressure. The smalls of the red camp will go down, but Bolts just fine in rotating back and picking that up for themselves. And so it's shell for NeilMah. I imagine early on that mindset is we'll turn that into a phantom shell at some point, get us out of this Odin cage.
Yeah.
Basically as soon as possible. We want as little uptime on an unquestioned Odin ult as possible. And so imagine phantom shell at some point here for NeilMah. Do you think as necessary though for the Bolts in that Ymir wall?
Considering the composition, I don't think it's going to be as pressing. I wouldn't be surprised if Awesome Jake goes towards it just to help out the team. But you know, Frenzy, the horrific emblem, I think Awesome Jake likes a lot. Even beads with this much CC could be on the cards here. So I don't think it's as pressing as the possible phantom shell there, just to try and deal with Baskin's cage. But with the amount of auto attackers the Oni Warriors have, I feel like if both Dardez and Qvo all focus one wall at the same time, like, should be able to break out pretty quickly. I think it's just that split second of, oh no, we're stuck, like we just want to instantly get out and not have to think about that, is the reason that you just default to a phantom shell in those situations. But because Baskin going for teleport doesn't have a blink yet, I don't imagine we're seeing this Odin get active over around Gold Furies or anything until like level 12. Same sort of style that Nika was playing last game, where it was just, you know, constantly rotating on that Amaterasu, that sort of thing. I imagine it'll wait just a little bit for both of these warriors to come online, just because they take a little more itemization.
Yeah, I mean, Nika didn't end up being like raid boss style Amaterasu. I mean, was close to it. Was very hard for the Bolts to kill off. Took 3 or 4 by the end of that game to pick off Nika over in mid. But potentially a similar playstyle here on the Osiris. Bit of a different look, of course, in the kit, but where the Amaterasu rises and falls, Osiris is sometimes in that conversation as well. Slowing that down, also an option for the Olympus Bolts. And so level 5's now been hit by both of these junglers. We saw LASBRA get very active early in game number 1. Dardez a bit safer on the Anhur, can leap out and away. It's QvoFred, maybe, Trilly, that has the most dynamic next couple of minutes with that Sonic Boom.
I can't believe I didn't even notice Qvo's start. My man
Qvo's.
He went Dev Gloves. He said, I don't care about crit, I don't care about Golden Blade. no stone cutting.
Wow.
I just want the dev gun. This is an item that I've played around with on Mercury, but I guess the extra penetration just made it much more attractive here for Qvo. I'm interested to see how he goes from here. Will it just be the typical rage after the dev gauntlets and it'll just replace the Blood Forge in the build, or maybe an entirely new Merc build that I've never seen before? I'm excited regardless, but Qvo, smart to hold off. Wouldn't be surprised, though, if LASBRA uses this to its advantage, right? Knowing that Mercury's not going to be doing too much damage at this moment.
Right.
Whereas Pele's online. You know, you got Blink, you got Volcanic Lightning, a full Jotun's Wrath. You should feel pretty confident looking for some engagements around this time, especially when Qvo is relatively weaker until that Dev Gauntlets get stacked up.
What are the most likely options then for Qvo and LASBRA? I mean, beads for both Ven and BaRRaCCuDDa. Baskin has teleport. If you're Qvo, what lane you headed to?
I mean, you're looking at Baskin, but I don't think you're killing Baskin. Like, that's the only place you could be looking at this moment, because BaRRaCCuDDa is just incredibly safe to separate and to just, you know, so much CC immunity could be some trouble. I don't imagine that you're looking to get active anytime soon. You probably want the Dev Gauntlets at the very least, unless Baskin gets poked out and it's just weak in lane. Like, no CC immunity on the Odin. You've got plenty of lockdown with the Sonic Boom into the special delivery. And if Nika's there, you should have pretty good confirmation for that damage as well. Just a lot of slows and CC to lock down that possibility. But I don't imagine. I think Qvo's probably going to be just fine waiting for a bit, not trying to get too active.
Yeah, maybe it'll be LASBRA then setting the pace. Say similar things about the flip side. Does look like some crit being built in there for QvoFred.
You went up mid?
And it's over in mid. We will do the fighting. Wild Hunt down from Ven, but that one just a disengage ult. Force the Oni Warriors back. 2 ultimates down in mid for the Oni Warriors, and it's just the Wild Hunt down from Venenu. So LASBRA holds on to his ult. It does end up being mid, but beads gone on Ven. Opens up the doors to return gank here in the next couple minutes.
Yeah, just ran it down mid lane, charged up the Sonic Boom, and said, "Hey, pre-ult Ven, I'm out to slam him from downtown," and got the beads down. Tons of damage as well, but not gonna be able to find that kill. Now Ven's gonna have to watch out. I wouldn't be surprised if Awesome Jake went up with a ward, and actually, there already is a ward behind the red buff, but not quite underneath that tower to try and reveal where Qvo could be coming from if that mid lane is where he decides to get active at once again. But with that ultimate down, should be a little bit safe for the time being, but it actually dashes in onto Awesome Jake here. They really want to try and punish this Nox with the Sovereignty and the Sprint available. I don't imagine they even have the damage to kill Awesome Jake this early on. I mean, Fields of Love is almost never going to find value with that Sprint active.
That was good movement there from NeilMah to avoid what likely would have just been some damage from the Olympus Bolts, but you never know just how caught out you are sometimes on Ymir until all the damage connects. Finally, a wall freeze hits. Neo had been swinging a few times, but hadn't hit anything just yet. And so the first 8 minutes, did see the attempt over in mid. And I'm just keeping my eyes on that Sonic Boom cooldown. It's QvoFred, you know, later in the game, yes, this Mercury gets there, but such a potent setup god. Alongside Pele early as well. BaRRaCCuDDa should be okay here. And really, Trelly, I mean, if you look back to game 1, the Oni Warriors were okay, letting this Soul kind of hang out. I mean, did end up doing a lot of damage, as most carries will. But later on in the game, BaRRaCCuDDa did turn into a bit of a threat. Always going to be difficult to slow down Bear when he's got Awesome Jake kind of hanging out over on the left-hand side.
Yeah, I'm surprised at how much duo lane is staying as a traditional duo lane.
Hung around.
They've been hanging around for a bit and at least sapping farm, but you can see Qvo is charging up the ult off the mark. LASBRA not falling for that one, so not going to be the target of Ven. More so looking for LASBRA, who didn't have any CC immunity except for the ultimate, but LASBRA just backsteps that and is in no more danger. Ven's beads up in about 25 seconds. That's pretty much all this Mercury's going to be able to do for another minute or so. So great plays there, or maybe a misplay possibly by Qvo, regardless. The Bolts should be sitting fine, but Awesome Jake stuck between three.
Oh no, is it Jake who gets caught out first? It sure is. Simply too much from the Oni Warriors, and not enough disengage for Awesome Jake. And that is now simple. So the Ymir is involved in first blood, but in the good way for the Oni Warriors. Assists across the board, everyone but the solo laner getting involved, and it's QvoFred off to a good start.
Yeah, I think Jake just really wanted to defend that purple buff up against 3. Dardez was a stone's throw from the fight as well, so possibly up against 4 in that situation. Probably not the best call. You know, I said with just the duo lane, of course, Neil and Vote, probably not enough, but with Qvo there, the CC lockdown, you should be hitting all of your abilities in that sense, and Jake definitely not going to be living through that one. So
many Devos.
Yeah,
I'm just not used to seeing 3 of them on the same team yet.
yeah, we only see one on the side of the Olympus Bolts, but
Is this Devo diff?
this is a bit of a Devo diff currently. I mean, Qvo still hasn't stacked it up yet, so hasn't got access to that
Right.
extra pen. I imagine Shadow Steel Shuriken coming up next, despite the fact that Wind Demon was the better of the, if you're going to get one of those crit items. For such a long time, it was Wind Demon, but just a little buff, a little bit of extra base power on Shadow Steel has made it the flavor of the month, so to speak. Everyone has been trying to get that extra anti-heal online as well as just the crit chance. So wouldn't be surprised if after this Dev Gauntlets gets stacked up into the Shadow Steel, and then that's when Qvo's officially online and it's going to start chunking. But walking down mid lane has Sonic Boom. I was wanting to see, would there be more aggression? Considering the fact that Dardez and Neil are over on Oracles, probably not for now.
Pyromancer pulled by the Bolts. Nika's here. Is this just going to be a drop? Yes, it is. We're testing Nika. Just seeing how quickly that Osiris will make their way on over to the Pyromancer. You know, I think Shadow Steel has really started to serve an important point here, Trelly, where for the longest time felt like, you know, you might be missing out. If you're building a more auto-attack style jungler, you couldn't build that Brawlers, which is so important in applying that anti-heal. So I think Shadow Steel has really filled that kind of need now, where you can still get some anti-heal. You don't feel like you're missing out if you pick more auto-attack centric style jungler. And we even see it on ADC sometimes with how important anti-heal has been. Pyromancer now pulled by the Bolts and confirmed by the Bolts, so that's a smart pull. And no big answer back from the Oni Warriors. Remember, this is where the Bolts built up their gold lead early in game 1.
There's the answer.
Around the neutral objectives. Yes, the answer delayed but still arrives. Oni Warriors on the Gold Fury. Awesome Jake will get his damage blocked, and the Gold Fury dropped by the Oni Warriors.
Yeah, that's just how quickly the Oni Warriors were able to burn down an objective. Possibly were unaware of that Pyromancer pull, but the second it went down, they realized, hey, we can probably just attack over here on the left side of the map. So that gold lead is going to climb, as we just saw the charts. Looking at a little bit closer to 2K here, 1,800 give or take. But this is sort of what I predicted, right? Now the Soul Laners have not left. You know, they've been sitting over in that lane because it just takes so long for both of these characters to get online. Lucky for the Warriors, though, they didn't really need their Soul Laners this time. Nika has been able to just sit in the lane and farm up with Baskin. But this Mercury has been consistently getting active elsewhere. Only netted 1 kill, but the fact that the burn just helped get that first Gold Fury, it's pretty much worth enough. Awesome Jake trying to grab the beads and will of Dardez. So now a little bit less safe in that mid lane is the Anhur.
Yep, still channel Desert Fury if need be. But now it's time to capitalize, right? I mean, it's so hard at times to find these surefire, yes, we're getting a kill type of ganks, but feels like in the last couple games we've said, okay, beads are now down on Vote. Okay, now beads are down on Dardez. Here's where an opportunity could arise for the Bolts. We will see now. Beads down on Dardez. Yes, still some safety there. But my goodness, QvoFred hurts. That's an ult onto BaRRaCCuDDa and some assistance from Vote. Oni Warriors find another one. Baskin over into mid, and wouldn't you guess it, Phantom Shell used. And the Bolts find nothing, and it's the Oni Warriors who have suddenly turned it. Shell needed by the Bolts. And that'll help with the disengage. But my goodness, that nearly went all sorts of sideways for the Olympus Bolts, nearly dropping a kill in an odd-numbered fight.
Yeah, all the while Vote is able to steal away the purple buff, clear another wave over and left, get so much damage onto the tower as well. I mean, just power farming are the Oni Warriors. Off a great ultimate there from Qvo. Mind you, BaRRa had beads. That was through the beats. So much damage. Awesome Jake stuck between a wall and an Anhur. We'll be able to jump into Ven, though. And now Ven, get him out. What are you doing? Ven was going into fight.
Ven wanted more. Now it's a fantastic ultimate from Ven, actually, to stop the damage of the Oni Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
Wild Hunt really forced a beat there in that fight. Neil's been on it with these walls. I'm trying to... When was the it was one. I'm definitely thinking of this correctly. I'm definitely not wrong here. It was NeilMah who went like 0-5 in a game on Ymir, and they ended up winning, I think, anyway. Maybe it was towards the end of the first half of Phase 3.
That sounds like a very typical Neil game anyways.
I really hope it is Neil and not some other... It was a Ymir Neil game where they ended up still turning it around and winning. We talked so much about, well, by the time the wall gets like max rank, it lasts forever regardless of how far behind you
Yeah,
are.
I do remember that. I think it was me and you, actually.
Right, but Neil has just been on it so far early in this game. Just the 1 assist. But as far as disruption goes, delaying out a kill under the mid lane tier 1, now forcing Awesome Jake and Ven to drop their ultimates over near the mid. Been the good type of Ymir game from Neil here in the first 15 minutes.
Would you believe me if I told you that Neil was doing more damage than LASBRA so far this game? Because he has.
What? Let me cover my eyes. Okay, I won't believe you with my eyes closed, but now that I look at the player damage charts, I have to. That is that egregious in your eyes?
I mean, it is because Neil, think about it. His freeze is hitting for, at max, like 120 damage on anyone.
Right, that Shards of Ice didn't even hit Jake if I saw it correctly, so you didn't get that big burst of damage
Yeah,
either.
so I mean, the amount of damage that a Ymir has to do to match that
Right.
of one Pele, oh, never mind. Who cares about that? BaRRaCCuDDa, see ya later. Another
Man.
Sonic Boom
On to BaRRa again.
for Cuvo. Beads down. You're getting got. Unfortunately, the Aegis just wasn't. There was no time. I mean, it was a Sonic Boom into the special delivery, dead before he hit the ground, and that's another kill. This time over to Vote actually. So 2 for Cuvo, 1 for Vote, 3 total. But the gold is certainly in favor of the Oni Warriors.
Yeah, man, and the pressure and the
XP as
the
well.
state of the game, all of it there for the Oni Warriors, and the ability to make these plays. I mean, a big Sonic Boom, even just the attempt, forced BaRRaCCuDDa into beads last time, did end up getting the kill, and now able to double up. And it's the opposite story. BaRRa felt fine in lane in game 1, now is 2 levels down to Vote, and a mountain of gold once Vote's able to go back. Vote is over 700 XP per minute. My man is power farming, and just behind is Nika. GPM, of course, there for the Osiris, but really the opposite ends, the bookends of the map right now. So strong for the Oni Warriors, and I think, Trilly, they've done a fantastic job of funneling that all in to these pressure points.
Yeah, definitely. With BaRRa gone, I mean, Vote's able to steal the buff, walk up, take away a Harpy Cap or 2 if possible, get the Interceptor on cooldown, as well as just pushing those waves underneath the tower. With the tier 1 and left gone as well, you better believe Vote's going to be able to find some farm. Oh no, BaRRa might be caught out again. An instant Heart Bomb, and here comes QvoFred. You got to imagine wanting to dash in on
Sonic
this one.
Boom's got to be close, right?
But here comes LASBRA as well. Maybe that's enough to throw away the... Yeah, actually, Nika makes the teleport as well. So a Primal Fury pull, I imagine not too far off. Here comes that Osiris. While the rest of the team, Jake might be up in too far, but Basket actually blinks in here.
Uh-oh, QvoFred, is he in some trouble? He sure is going to get chased down, but Sonic Boom puts him on the other side of the fight. The Aegis is perfect, and QvoFred lives. Vote now has turned around this fight. Is this the final straw for the Olympus Bolts already here in game 2? My goodness, you can't drop the kill onto the Mercury, much less give a double kill over to Vote. And now Nika can rev the engines, forcing back BaRRa and Ven.
That was insane from QvoFred. The ult in the cage, knowing that you can't ult out of the cage, but you can juke around for a bit, and a perfectly timed Aegis, as you said. I don't even know if it's Primal Fury. It seems to me like the Oni Warriors, they're heading over towards that Fire Giant. They don't need extra gold in hand. They want that extra buff and sustain so they can start pushing down these towers. Ven and BaRRa are decently close, and Baskin actually teleports in. I imagine the stall game is all they're looking for. But here comes Baskin. He's tanky, but I don't know how much he can do here.
Need a miracle now if you're the Olympus Bolts. You need the Dream Steal. You'll have the combo if you're Baskin. Frozen by Neil, up and over, but it's a bit too early. Oh, no, it's not. It's right on time. Baskin steals away the FG. And the Oni Warriors may be more delayed than anything, but they will not get the Fire Giant, and it was the spear. The leap was too early, but the spear right on time. The Bolts and Baskin steal away the Fire Giant.
And now the Olympus Bolts trying to grab the Primal Fury, but here comes Nika and Cuvo trying to stop that one in its tracks. You gotta back up. That Fury should. Beautiful pillar to stop the old. Awesome Jake has not been able to land an ult. And Vote gets soloed by LASBRA over in right.
That's a shutdown. That's a big shutdown now for the Olympus Bolts and LASBRA. Suddenly the winds of change. They're blowing here in game number 2. It's a long hill to climb for the Olympus Bolts. But I even in a loss, this is what Bolts fans needed to see, I think, down the stretch here. Some type of fight back, an attempt on a steal, giving yourself an opportunity. Now LASBRA's gotten a kill on a Vote, one of the strongest members of the Oni Warriors, if not the strongest, off the map for 20 or so seconds. But how much can you really do ends up being where this conversation has to go back. You're still pretty far down. How much can the Bolts realistically get done with this FG?
I mean, that is the question at the moment. Grouped up in mid, QvoFred actually behind the Bolts currently, but I guess so fast, not in too much danger. Beautiful blink, catches his dash. There's no way Cubo's making out of this one. Baskin caught the dash with the ultimate. That was so clean. Baskin actually top damage in the game currently on this Odin. Has been extremely clutch, stealing away the Fire Giant, catching Cuvo out. Tier 1 tower is gone, and the Bolts are going up mid lane looking for this tier 2 as well. They've got no fear in their hearts at the moment.
Wow, once this wall from NeilMah drops down, there could be some big damage numbers afoot. Baskin leaps backwards. LASBRA, no blink, but in a strong position as a Pele to dash in. Vote, no shell, does have beads. Awesome Jake sends his damage forward. It's a freeze now onto the Nox and just different pages from the Bolts. And Jake has had to make a play on his own, unable to stand strong. But that's big damage from BaRRaCCuDDa on the eruption back into the team fight. But LASBRA deleted, and the tables have been turned once again. A double kill from Vote, and the Oni Warriors watch their tower crumble, but they will watch it with 4 extra kills and a triple kill for Vote.
Cuvo ults in from downtown on a BaRRaCCuDDa. Awesome Jake actually stepped up and hit a massive ultimate, but these walls, as well as the pillar stuns here from Dardez, they don't need Fire Giant. Now the Oni Warriors are charging up mid lane. They just lost their tier 2 tower, and they're trying to get one of their own. Just Ven for another 4 seconds. Awesome Jake spawning in here shortly. I don't imagine there's going to be anything else. Yeah, the tier 2 tower is all that's going to be coming through here. Fire Giant still on Ven, and Ven alone for another minute. But what a back and forth game. I mean, it didn't seem like the Olympus Bolts were really in control. They stole the FG and got a pick, but still, now all in the driver's seat once again are the Oni Warriors. Gonna grab that tier 2, wait for this Fire Giant to peer off Ven, and then set up for another brawl towards FG. It's gonna be spawning in about minute 30. Wow.
Now LASBRA started to catch up in the damage department. Call it even with QvoFred.
he barely just passed Neil. That's
well,
all
I bring this up now. I mean, now it's no longer just an indictment onto LASBRA. Neither of the junglers have lit up the damage charts here.
For sure.
I can at least add some company to LASBRA's.
He just jumped to one place though.
Right, but I'm now giving him a bailout. That QvoFred also, despite a good game on the Mercury so far, damage-wise,
that is fair.
Is in a similar spot. Setup-wise, QvoFred still at 6 affected kills to the 2 of LASBRA.
Right.
Oni Warriors jungler in a really good spot. And a combined 0 and 6. With 0, you know, we sometimes leave out the assists on the KDA. No, this is a true 0-6-0 for the dual lane of the Olympus Bolts. Just haven't been able to survive these team fights. Though, BaRRaCCuDDa has gotten off a good chunk of that damage trailing, and BaRRa's abandoned any type of ring early on in this build. Has gone full mage burst damage. Still waiting on that Book of Thoughts to stack up.
Yeah, I won't lie. This is my favorite way to play Soul. Like maybe Telekines at the end, but besides that, just full burst damage. Your Stellar Burst Supernova combo is one-shotting 3 members of the Oni Warriors at the moment, and honestly, Neil might even be in that mix if you get some anti-heal for the Mail of Renewal. So as long as you're able to get that combo off, you could be really chunking, especially when that Obsidian Shard gets through. But BaRRa, as you said, has been under a lot of fire here, especially from this Mercury. QvoFred has had that duo lane's number. Now, with a little extra ward coverage, the Oni Warriors, you can see, are setting up for the Fire Giant to touchdown shortly, but the rest of the Bolts are here. My eyes immediately are on Basket. He's been making game-saving plays here for the Bolts. These blink cages are going to have to be top tier. Actually went into the Brawler's beat stick as well, so going to be doing a little bit of extra damage. Keep your eyes on that Odin. The Oni Warriors got to look out, but hey, they've got 2 Phantom Shells and a Fortifying Shell. I don't think they're that worried about the cage.
No, I'm not thinking so either. Awesome Jake, though, barely gets out of the wall that NeilMah had thrown up. Use the sprint, though, to get out. So, you know, small commitment on the disengage, but you'd still love to have it going into this next team fight, especially with the Fields of Love down. Fire Giant begins to get burnt by the Oni Warriors. One of the Phantom Shells, the only Phantom Shell now available, has been used by the Bolts while the Oni Warriors double back for the FG. It's a split disengage. Can QvoFred find it? Needed to go up and over, did Baskin. LASBRA has to blink away as the Sonic Boom didn't quite hit its mark.
Yeah, wasn't able to hit anyone there. LASBRA didn't have to beads, but blinked out. Out of trouble from the Sonic Boom. Tier 2 tower over and right. Going to be going down pretty quickly. So Fire Giant on 5 of the Oni Warriors. and they only really used Qvo and Nika's ultimate to get it. That Oni Fury did just spawn in as well, so a possible chance to just back up and go over to the left side of the map and do a bit of farming. In that meantime, you can see that the rest of the Bolts are sort of just scoundering for farm, going over to the right lane, stealing some on left, but LASBRA could be in some trouble here. I imagine the rest of the Oni Warriors are trying to chase him down, but is looking for a nice place to back. He's going to be found out. There's no way, right? They gave up.
Looks like, yeah, you're going to drop off. Because every once in a while, those chases will go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And you burn, another 10 or 15 seconds off an FG, which, Matt, it's an extra wave or two of an attempt that you can get on a Phoenix if you chase for too long. So the Oni Warriors, they give up their chase on the Laz, pick up the Fury, and start to make their way towards the last tower on the map on the Bolt side of things. Should make quick work of this. Now, we arrived at the same place, all the same, Trelly, that we did at the end of Game 1. It's a bit different looking here in Game 2, but we still arrived, right? We have arriven.
You're making me second guess it now. We have arrived.
You say anything with enough conviction, you can make
it. Yeah, because your GPS, when you actually...
You have arrived.
Yeah, you have arrived.
You have arriven.
You have arriven. You have arrived.
We have arrived to the same place nonetheless. The Oni Warriors 10,000 gold ahead and a Deathbringer for QvoFred. Now it's a similar, build, this double ADC comp. It's an Osiris instead of an Amaterasu. Obviously the jungle pick looks a bit different for QvoFred with the Mercury here this game. Does the Siege, in your mind, look all that different for the Oni Warriors, or are they still far enough ahead that compositionally they can sort of fill up some of those cracks?
I mean, it seems like they've had the same exact game plan throughout this game. Walk up, Neil's going to freeze someone, immediately Dardez is then going to pillar that person into the wall, and then they're probably going to die. I mean, it's happened to Jake like 3 times now. It's happened to BaRRaCCuDDa as well. There's only one Phantom Shell, and it's on Ven. It's up at the moment. I imagine baiting that out could be the play, but with Qvo going mid, actually, it's going to be Nika going mid. I was going to say, Qvo doesn't have the greatest 1v1 on a LASBRA, especially if he's not leading with the ultimate, so probably smarter to have the Mercury on this side of the map and let Nika take that 1v1 with LASBRA, and then look towards the left side of the map. Trebuchet is going to help out a bit, but already the Oni Warriors are sieging in.
Good silences from Jake as well. Cage dropped Phantom Shell number 1, used by Vote. Got another Phantom Shell. I think Vote feeling okay with that trade out. Now Baskin doesn't have the big jump in ult combo. Oni Warriors now group is 5. Watch out for Sonic Boom. It's QvoFred hovering at the back of the team fight. Beads off of Ven. Could now be the target for this Mercury. Left side Phoenix. Whittled down. One more wave. Maybe just the Trebuchet is all that's needed. The Oni Warriors Trelly able to delay.
Yeah, they're just stalling out for the Trebuchet here. 3 more hits or so. If the Bolts want to defend this Phoenix, they need to get active right now, or at least try and kill that Trebuchet, but no one from the Bolts is stepping up here. I mean, this is clearly just a stall game for the Trebuchet to get this. They don't have to walk in. Finally, they will.
This is what Trebuchets were made for. Yep. True sieges, back in the day, the Dark Ages.
Knocking on the doors of the Phoenix.
Right. They were out in the marshy swamp. It was all muddy and gross. We were just sitting there watching Trebuchets wail away at the gates of the castle. That is the least fight commitment siege I've seen in a little while, and it's good from the Oni Warriors. Why do anything else? Right as the FG buff falls off, a near perfect fire giant for the Oni Warriors. Olympus Bolts happy they didn't lose more potentially, but you're going into a fire giant 12,000 gold down. And Trelly, it's a similar issue. As the game plan has looked the same for the Oni Warriors, the lack of engage, granted how far behind they are, I'm not sure what would work. The Olympus Bolts haven't been able to ask the questions yet.
Yeah, not yet. And they certainly don't have answers for the questions the Oni Warriors are asking. But as far as ammunition in the Trebuchet goes, it's like a rock and then, I believe, an oil-soaked towel of sorts, and then you light that on fire.
Right.
That's going to be some solid damage.
Yeah, of course.
I just don't imagine a Phoenix would much care.
No, it's the rock that...
Oh, the rock? Okay, the fire's for
right.
everyone else. The rock is for the
Phoenix.
Phoenix. Nika immediately spotting out the rest of the Bolts. I was going to say might walk into a bit of a trap, but has the beads ready and not going to care too much about that fact. Pyromancer going to go down here. I imagine that the Oni Warriors would prefer to wait for the enhanced fire giant in 40 seconds, but with LASBRA wrapping around here, maybe a fight just breaks out instead.
Says hello.
Nika's going to try and chase down LASBRA. We'll never catch him, but it'll be a fun chase nonetheless. I got my eyes on Qvo, though. Where's the Sonic Boom happening? Not on Awesome Jake, who has to ult just to get out of trouble.
Man, Vote's on a a crazy pace here this game, 6-1 and 4. This Cupid is absolutely shredding. Now BaRRaCCuDDa, top damage in the game. Yet again, BaRRa in this build have been able to find the damage, just as the Oni Warriors have on the Fire Giant, 5 seconds away from being enhanced. So a beat of hesitation from the Warriors, and now we are enhanced. Wonder if that maybe changes some of the decision-making here of the Olympus Bolts. Freeze, pillar, wall, all of it onto Baskin. But no damage or commitment from the Warriors.
Yeah, Baskin's got to go back to base. The fire waves are beating away on the Titan. Someone's going to have to go back. I imagine the Oni Warriors know that, and they'll wave a Baskin getting picked off here immediately.
Oh, they'll send him back all right. They'll send him back the easy way, but BaRRaCCuDDa has found the first kill. What is happening? They're 12,000 gold down, and all the damage in the world is there for the Olympus Bolts. This is unbelievable. The Oni Warriors have lost 4, and back to base go the Bolts. What a turnaround here in game number 2.
He had 14,000. That was 5,000 damage from his ult alone in that team fight. Now Nika's here trying to perform the miracle steal onto the enhanced Fire Giant.
What in the world? BaRRaCCuDDa was promised to turn around, and the Bolts get the enhanced Fire Giant, and this gold lead is likely to shrink here over the next couple of minutes. Unreal. You can never give up on these players. And the Bolts, they have stepped forward, they have made the play, and they've given themselves a chance in game 2.
Yeah, it looks like Ven running it down mid lane might have enough time to grab that Phoenix with QvoFred spawning in 8 seconds with ultimate. I doubt that's going to be the call. Nika could be getting caught out here, going for the teleport. If the stun hits, not going to happen. This Osiris is going to be staggered, but eventually should fall down here, especially with Ven rotating into this fight. It's going to take a bit, but the rest of the Oni Warriors have spawned
Nika
in.
delay. No, he's going to get taken down. I was wondering if there was a chance for Nika to kind of beckon the Bolts in there, while the rest of the Oni Warriors respawned and came back. Now it's a full stagger onto Nika, 50 seconds on that death timer. And suddenly, the scales tilt over towards the Olympus Bolts, still down in gold, but up in map pressure. Left side Phoenix back from the Oni Warriors. This might be the biggest turnaround we've seen this year, but QvoFred is 101v1 over in mid. And the right side Phoenix of the Oni Warriors falls.
Yeah, so they got to back up here. The Bolts could lose that left side Phoenix. One more fire wave is barreling down. Huge, though, that Cuvo wins that 1v1 versus LASBRA in the mid lane. So that could have been another Phoenix loss, but I guess the Olympus Bolts feeling confident enough to push up for this one. Bracer goes down. That's going to help with the DPS. Good wall from NeilMah by Cuvo.
Whoa! Venenu's found the first. A double freeze from the Oni Warriors, though, and NeilMah has set the stage, and the actors take their place. 2 kills for the Oni Warriors, 1 on the LASBRA earlier. Now Awesome Jake loses his FG buff, and QvoFred MIA for 45.
If they chase this one down, they should have a decent chance of that left Phoenix going down, but someone has to go back to base. Ven looks like he's going to be able to foot it the whole way back and defend that Phoenix, but NeilMah is not going to let you go without a fight all the way towards this red buff, and that left side bird will stand tall. So all the while, Oni Warriors still certainly up in gold, but we're almost to the point where that gold lead doesn't matter. I imagine the Olympus Bolts have plenty of gold in pocket. BaRRaCCuDDa's been sitting on, I assume, like 3K. Yeah, 3,200 at this point. So should have some massive power spikes here for the Olympus Bolts. And all off the back of a great engage. I mean, it seemed kind of rough. And then Baskin gets a big ultimate again. BaRRa's damage jumped up 5K just from one Odin cage. I believe
we got to go all the way back to that fight.
Yeah,
right? It's been
that's what started this snowball. Then Nika goes in for the steal, doesn't quite find it. The chase ensues the whole way from blue buff to his own blue buff. Finally goes down. Cuvo wins the 1v1 in mid, and then dies with so much damage coming from the Bolts. But now, simple as this. The Bolts have 1 minute on Enhanced Fire Giant, and they have to get the last tower on the map, the last true tower on the map.
Wow.
Tier 2 over on left.
Wow. I mean, this is a testament to the Olympus Bolts and their mentality. You know, I'm thinking 5 minutes ago, this game is about as over gets. Right on time, BaRRaCCuDDa makes the big damage play. Oni Warriors, that gold lead, doesn't matter now. Matters is map state, and there's only 1 Phoenix down, and it's on the Oni Warriors side of the map. That's good Fields of Love. As the beads taken off of Venenu. Still 30 seconds left on Baskin, Ven, BaRRa. Their Enhanced Fire Giant still stands. The Bracer down. But Vote no longer that defensive ultimate. Still up to NeilMah, though, to throw up the wall and find the freeze.
Yeah, it's rough because BaRRa's beads are up in 10 seconds, but you lose EFG in 18 seconds. So do you balance that 8 seconds to try and go for the bird? Probably not the call, and that's going to be a full retreat. If you look at the Oni Warriors relics, they had everything and their full build. So they were perfectly ready to try and defend that once the enhanced fire giant has fell off. Right side fire minions the Oni Warriors are going to have to deal with, but very close to the fire giant. That should not be a problem. Definitely the best Phoenix to have down in a situation like this. And now Ven's beads are down for the next 90 seconds. So I got my eyes once again on NeilMah and Qvo. Who's going to find the CC onto this mid laner? Who is going to put Ven in an uncomfortable position? Because if he's able to free cast like he has been throughout this game, you know, could be some trouble. 2-0 on this Cernunnos. Has not died yet. The positioning of Ven has been pretty stellar. But now here comes the rest of the Warriors. As I said, the wave is cleared up over on right. And Ven's just going to shred through the Pyromancer. EFG touches down here shortly.
Bolts fans hoping, praying that this comeback now turns itself into a win. A team in need of end-of-year momentum and confidence. If nothing else, have proven there's plenty of fight left in this Olympus Bolts team. It also shows why the Oni Warriors haven't been able to cleanly get out of any sets against the Olympus Bolts in the regular season since the inception of these two teams. The Bolts will not make it easy. And now, with the right side Phoenix respawning as well, Fire Minions should be dealt with somewhat easily. Trelly, it simplifies. We got a Fire Giant dance and we've got 6 Phoenixes up on the map. Can't overextend. You gotta find the initiation. And up until that last Fire Giant fight, it's been the Oni Warriors who have had it.
Yeah, it certainly has been. You got to put some pressure on the BaRRaCCuDDa as well. This Soul has been doing explosive amounts of damage. The Oni Warriors are going to walk forward and just try to find some CC. Remember when Ven's beads were down, they just came up 1 second ago. So now, as far as things are considered, the only real advantage is that one item on Awesome Jake's belt. But NeilMah walks up, gets a freeze on a Ven, but takes some damage.
Whoa, and it's QvoFred on the follow-up. The cage has been thrown, and Awesome Jake is the one. Delete it first. Up and over go the Oni Warriors. BaRRaCCuDDa on the fadeaway. Helps out Venenu. It's far from clean. 2 down a side. Ven shreds through for the double kill. And now it's BaRRaCCuDDa with room to play as well. And my God, the damage is huge. The Olympus Bolts, they've gotten 3. Baskin makes it a 4th. It's another one for Baskin, and it's a deicide for the Bolts.
It's Baskin and BaRRaCCuDDa up for the rest of the time. They can walk through that weakened Phoenix, but I don't know how long Baskin can actually tank up. He's got teleport, though. Do they have a ward in hand? They do. BaRRaCCuDDa has a ward. Get this Phoenix. Baskin teleports back in, and that's GG. There's no way that NeilMah gets back up and stops this. Baskin has to teleport, though. That's got to be the call.
Baskin
drop
jumps
the ward
out and away.
There's the ward. Get away from the minions,
ward.
though. The minions,
oh,
Baskin.
No, the minions. They're going to stop Baskin. You've got to clear the minions.
He's got to
tell.
Look at
LASBRA. 15 seconds. It's 15 seconds. They got to go back. They got to leave. The minions make the difference. And the Oni Warriors have life yet. It's the right side Phoenix gone again. And again, it's just the right side Phoenix. And it's back to the enhanced Fire Giant. It's got to be an immediate pull here, but can QvoFred and NeilMah now make their play to keep the Oni Warriors in the game?
BaRRaCCuDDa doesn't do that much damage, and here comes Nika
teleporting?
immediately from the backline. BaRRa's taking a good bit of damage as well, and here comes that Osiris.
Oh my God, I'm scared. As Nika is tethered, or sends out the tether, and we will disengage once more. A 5v5 again. Now you got to take stock of relics. Look at this. It is a wasteland. There's a shell for Dardez.
BaRRa's untouched, though.
Aegis and beads for BaRRaCCuDDa. You're talking about 30, 45 seconds on most of these. And a fire minion wave on right should be dealt with by the Oni Warriors. I think still simplified here as far as a 5v5.
Awesome Jake still has not finished up that last item. So going to be missing out a little bit of extra damage there. BaRRaCCuDDa has not been able to upgrade relics. Besides that, I cannot believe the minion stopped Baskin's back. He wanted to teleport in so bad.
That is so funny.
Surging forward is NeilMah. Freeze for stun. Not going to care too much. As we see a little bit of a retreat to the heart bomb for the double stun. I don't know who feels more confident here. I mean, it should be the Bolts. They've been riding the momentum of this game for so long, but they haven't been able to step up too far. Baskin has been playing incredibly well trying to frontline for this squad when Awesome Jake hasn't been able to land those crucial silences. But still, frontlining they have been doing. And the damage charts you can see.
BaRRa jumped up another like 12,000.
These ults have been massive. This is what the full burst soul build can do. It's insane.
Well, Relic's back up now for the Oni Warriors. Everything except teleport for Nika, but don't need much of that. Unless Nika's going to be the one resetting. Aggressive positioning forward. Good stun onto Volt, and the cage immediately follows. Phantom Shell used. Volt is able to backpedal. And the Bolts don't like what they see. And they will now disengage on the other side.
That's a decent pull, though. You get the Phantom Shell from Vote. Still one more available, but Baskin's ultimate will be back up here shortly. The Oni Warriors, Phoenix, still not spawned back in, so Dardez consistently has to go over to right to clear those. Besides that, though, I'm just taking stock of the relics. It was just that Phantom Shell. That's all that's really down for the time being. And as long as NeilMah is on point, shouldn't have to worry about the next cage that comes through from Baskin. But LASBRA heading back to base.
What a ridiculous game this is.
Yeah, we're going to see a full-on reset. If you just joined in and you missed the first 30 minutes, the Oni Warriors were up like 12,000 gold about 20 minutes ago.
In a miracle team fight from BaRRaCCuDDa brought the Olympus Bolts back into this game. That Fire Giant push then went back and forth. Nothing was clean in the mid lane fights. And now we go back to another FG where the Bolts had a chance to win it. They get that fight pretty effectively. It's down to a couple carries. And the deicide ultimately, but then the minions stop the back of Baskin and prevent the back teleport in end play. And my lord, we are at 41 minutes. Yes, the gold, still about 6,000 separating, but it's only Awesome Jake who's not full build at this point, so matters not. And what a welcome sight for Olympus Bolts fans. The Bolts the one stepping forward on the other side of the Fire Giant pit. And it begins. Fire Giant pulled by the Bolts. Wall thrown up by NeilMah. The gauntlet's been thrown down. Awesome Jake now left alone. It's Vote with the first. The Olympus Bolts still have some chance for burst damage. Fire Giant for the Oni Warriors.
Where's
Lord of the
Cubo?
Afterlife in from Nika. The cage down from Baskin. BaRRaCCuDDa being chopped away by the Osiris. Beads and Aegis used. NeilMah deleted by LASBRA. QvoFred, he won't die. LASBRA nearly with a double, but QvoFred lives. The most important survival of the game so far. Then it's LASBRA and Jake, the two casualties, and NeilMah on the other side.
I can't believe BaRRa got out. And once again, Baskin comes up massive. QvoFred face planted into the ult there. Baskin blocked it with the cage. That could have been a huge sonic boom that got stopped by the cage there from Baskin. Still losing 2, and EFG is not going to be easy. Relics aren't looking so good for either team here, but at the very least, Cuvo has the beads and Vote's Phantom Shell is back up. Going to grab the Oni Fury for the Oni Warriors. And that right side bird has spawned in as well. So we're back to 6. Phoenix is strong, but the Oni Warriors have the enhanced Fire Giant this time around. I mean,
let's go another 18. Let's hit the hour mark. Why not, you know?
BaRRa should be 50K by that point if these ults keep landing. I'm amazed that Soul was able to make it out there. Just great plays.
You're telling me the 4 ADCs are on top of the damage charts, Trelly? No way.
Wait a second. Is this? Wait, no. If Zatman was here, he'd say somehow they're, you know, this is fake. I don't know how these
right. No, they're only in this position because the strength.
Because the
of
tanks
the tanks
are so OP.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. They're creating
they're
so much
the
space.
That's right. That's
look
right.
at BaRRa's damage. He's only able to do that because of how tanky Baskin has been this game.
Right. BaRRa would have 20 less thousand damage done. Look, if there wasn't 71,000 mitigated by Nika.
Wait a second. We might be onto something here.
That's right. Yes, as that man buffed them. My goodness. What a game we've had. And everyone's really stepped up. Obviously, BaRRa's received a lot of hype for his burst damage in these fights.
Oh, yeah.
Ven has been a consistent factor as well.
Oh, yeah.
All of the ultimates have looked good, and then a couple double kills in some of the pivotal fights have given the Bolts their chance. Now it's the Oni Warriors, the one pressing for maybe the win here. Enhanced Fire Giant, ultimately the difference maker this far into the game. About keeping Vote alive. 8-3-8 on the Cupid. Maybe about keeping the Phoenixes alive, because, man, this backline of the Oni Warriors hurts, and trying to juggle. Do you go for Nika? Do you go for the defense? It's been difficult for the Bolts.
Yeah, Ven's beads come up in 1 second as well as LASBRA, so now most relics are up, but BaRRaCCuDDa still without both of them for another 20 seconds. The Oni Warriors have been whittling away at both Phoenixes, and because Nika has EFG, can essentially walk in for free, do some damage, and sustain. Remember, minions are not needed. But BaRRa's been constantly throwing out these stellar bursts and pushing back the carries of the Oni Warriors. Finally, that mid Phoenix should be going down, but it looks like the Bolts are going to step up here. Vote takes some good
Or
damage.
if the Bolts just have to fight at some point. I mean, you're going to lose your mid lane Phoenix.
Yep. Oni minions on right as well.
Right, very close. Couple Oni minions left on right. And with 54 seconds left. Oh no, it's a pump fake. Oh no, but the Olympus Bolts read it well. The Oni Warriors back away and then start to walk themselves back forward. I was going to say, yeah, 45 seconds left on this EFG. Now Nika just continues being obnoxious, walks all the way over to the right side Phoenix. It's a perfect split push by the Oni Warriors. And it'll pay off here. One Phoenix left standing and one Bastion of Hope, maybe two if you count the Titan.
I imagine the Oni Warriors still try to push down this left side Phoenix. I mean, Nika is currently going for the end. Like, this man is just marching
huge
in
wave.
with the Oni Warriors. Doesn't even care at this point. Vendash is in. They're trying to pick Cuvo. Good cage in, though.
Oh, 2 versus 3. LASBRA's killed off Cuvo. Nika, Lord of the Afterlife's away. 3 Phoenixes down. The game will not end now. But when will it end? Can the Bolts find more kills? Can you get enough of the Oni Warriors dead that you're considering a siege for yourselves? It's Nika and QvoFred off the map, and what can the Bolts get done is 5 versus 3.
I'm not leaving if I'm the Oni Warriors. There's no way I'm backing and trying to defend 5v3. I'm going for the end, but it looks like they feel confident enough. They're backing up. With 3 Phoenixes down, there's no shot you catch me at my Titan. I am barreling towards that Titan.
We're finding out just how antiperspirant this deodorant is on me right now. At 46 minutes, the Olympus Bolts with 3 Phoenixes down in a 5 versus 3 up against NeilMah plus 2 carries. You couldn't write it up any better. Wall is thrown up from the Ymir. Mid lane Phoenix crumbles. Is this your only chance if you're the Olympus Bolts? 18 seconds left on QvoFred. And the Bolts looking for the initiation. Beads off of Dardez. The Fields of Love have been dropped. This is unbelievable. The Olympus Bolts now turn their eyes to the Titan. But the Oni Warriors, Dardez, vote they've stood tall but not tall enough. What a game and what a win for the Olympus Bolts.
I'm telling you, there's no way I'm back in there. That is so hard to keep your Titan alive versus 5. You don't even have to look for kills at that point. It was close. Beautiful cage in from Baskin. The damage was so clean. I cannot believe, Dave, that we're going to a game 3 in a situation like that. But you got to be happy if you're a Bolts fan.
Oh my goodness. That's one of the most unbelievable games of SMITE I've watched in weeks. That had everything in it. You get a fire giant that should have been 100% guaranteed from the Oni Warriors at the 25-minute mark. You're down 7,000, 12,000 gold, and BaRRaCCuDDa blows up the Oni Warriors. I'm certain they're about to lose. I'm certain the Bolts are about to lose. They kill off Nika and Cuvo under the Titan. I mean, is that a shortcoming in your mind? If you're the Oni Warriors, are you too split up in that moment when you have the advantage?
I mean, I think getting those 3 Phoenixes down was the win, and then once they realized the Bolts were W-key, and I'm going in for the end. It doesn't work, clearly. I don't know if there was a right call there, but they couldn't defend up against 5 that late in the game. Your Titan just dies too fast.
Also, the antiperspirant, not enough in a game like that. My goodness, we go to one more. Oni Warriors versus Olympus Bolts. The thrilling conclusion coming up next.
She turned the gold into grief. She painted colors that don't exist. She used to smile but never for free. She used to cry but now she sleeps. And in the night when no one sees, turn into stone like figurine. I spend my life building dreams. She's a diamond in the rough. Flip a coin and spin it. She was a game by default. It makes a lifelong
Well, what a way to start out part 2 of our phase with going to a game number 3 in the very first set of our week of play here in week number 5 of the SMITE Pro League. The Olympus Bolts able to bring this one back and tie up the set and now move us on to the coveted third game between them and the Warriors. At this point, the Olympus Bolts will not allow themselves to go down 2-0 to the Warriors and may not even allow themselves to go down to the Warriors at all. And Mifflin, this game started out so well for the Oni Warriors. I mean, they built themselves up a massive lead, but when it came down to these Fire Giant fights, I mean, in particular one, I think it was around like 25 or so minutes that kind of then escalated into this back and forth battle between these two teams. Olympus Bolts are able to cleanly get in there, wipe the Oni Warriors, delay this game a little bit longer, and then eventually, 2-3 Fire Giants later, 15 plus minutes of play, Olympus Bolts are the ones that come out on top.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue almost that the Oni Warriors had won that game thrice before they lost, right? That if they had just secured the first Fire Giant, that's probably just GG. If they would have cleanly went out on some of those team fights, probably just GG. Putting themselves in the position repeatedly to move in towards the Fire Giant, I think, just a very difficult situation to be in considering how long that game had gone. But we had talked about it during the P's and B's, and we talked about it in the initial death segment. The Olympus Bolts composition in the latest portion of the game would just have the advantage. I would argue that that's not what happened, though. It wasn't draft diff. It wasn't the fact that the Bolts had a more standard draft, and it wasn't the fact that they had a standard mage. This one was play on field. The Oni Warriors made one cardinal sin twice in this game. In these team fights, you can't be focusing Baskin first. Well, once Odin drops his ring and you've disengaged, there's just about no reason to chase out that Odin. And because they decide, the Oni Warriors that is, to try and take out Baskin, just kiting him, the entirety of the Warriors deeper and deeper into the Olympus Bolts backline while trying to do the near impossible, which is kill a 40-minute Odin. It just allowed for BaRRaCCuDDa to free cast, and BaRRaCCuDDa free casting looks real good, by the way. Oh, yeah. My man hit everything and then some. It allowed Ven to free cast. His damage was absolutely through the roof. The Olympus Bolts backline diffed the Oni Warriors in this one. But I'm still running the numbers, and I still keep thinking about that 25-minute Fire Giant. Had the Oni Warriors just not lost it to an Odin Spear, we'd probably be in Game 2 of Set 2 by now.
I mean, Odin Spear, even with the build that Baskin had done, doesn't do a whole lot of damage.
And I'm pretty sure it
imagine-
was the tick, not the throw.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the throw animation, the sound effect, but I don't know if that hit a god or if that hit the fire giant, if that's inevitably what ended up being the killing blow and the steal there. But at the end of it there, BaRRaCCuDDa, 41,000 player damage. Venenu, 35K of his own regard there. And the thing about this build that BaRRaCCuDDa went, this is not a traditional soul build that we see. You know, we were going back a few months, we're looking at 4 rings and like a Bancrofts or a Rattata-Hootie. You just build tons of attack speed and then just shred everything in that regard. BaRRaCCuDDa's build was very expensive, more like 5,000 gold more expensive than a normal hunter build. So it took all that time for BaRRaCCuDDa to ramp up to that point, and then we get to see what it is at the end of the game. But picks and bans for game number 3 now underway. And the adaptations for both of these teams moving through. Oni Warriors will take that first pick spot for themselves. Last time around, the Olympus Bolts banned away the Morgan, Dodgy, and the AMC to keep that one away from Dardez in the mid. Do you think those are maybe some of the same styles of bans we need to see? I mean, immediately in that second pick does kind of change things up. But do you think there's anything specific that the Bolts or the Warriors need to target out in this next game?
If I'm the Warriors, I might, ban out
There we
that
go.
soul. Go ahead. I would consider that probably one of their best moves they could make there when BaRRaCCuDDa is playing as well as he has in both games. Let's go ahead and get him off that pick. So now, with AMC still available, the Bolts need to make a difficult decision. Do they want to ban out the AMC? If they don't, the Oni Warriors very likely to take it in that first slot. If they do, the Oni Warriors could potentially just move in towards that Vulcan. Almost a damned if you do, damned if you don't. So Hades is the ban, going to restrict Nika ever so slightly. And the Oni Warriors with Dodgy still available.
Yeah.
Could take that for themselves. No way you're going to look at an AMC and Vulcan draft for the Bolt. So you should get one of the two either way.
Yeah, I was just wondering because Yamoja was the ban in the second slot and only the Morgan there, and then it was a couple magical hunters banned away by the Oni Warriors. What was going to be left open for the Oni Warriors, at least themselves? We've heard Nika, whether joking or not in the past, has said that Hades is just a win con for him and the team. The Olympus Bolts banned away, gave up the Dodgy. But now it's a question for the Bolts of, do you grab the AMC or do you grab the Vulcan? Because I think you're right in both regards. It's not one that you draft for both teams. So do you let the Oni Warriors have the choice of it, or do you
Don't
take
give
that?
the Oni Warriors the choice.
So you're saying probably take the AMC away from Dardez.
Here's the thing, man. It's not a choice, right? The Oni Warriors are going to take AMC if it's available.
Right.
So the Bolts need to weigh the decision of, do we want AMC? If yes, take it here. If no, you don't need to pick your mid laner at all because it's pretty unlikely that the Oni Warriors would take both themselves. Cupid as the lock-in and Ymir as well. So you're restricting the dual lane. It's a complete inverse of what we had seen previously. Man, I mean, looking at it, it almost feels like the teams are swapped, right? I mean,
Right.
That's like a classic Bolts Oni Warriors like trade up here. But I suppose the Bolts haven't moved towards the AMC too much in the past. Maybe just let that one through. Get the Vulcan for yourself regardless. Then the Nox lock in on the other side. We got these teams right? Are we sure?
I'm wondering.
Can we get a double check here?
I'm wondering the exact same thing. 'Cause, I mean, this is a textbook draft for the Warriors on the Bolt side over there, and then this is a Bolt style of draft for the Warriors over here. I'm wondering the same thing if we got them correct in that regard. Because I mean, the Cernunnos has been a first pick for the Olympus Bolts both in game 1 and 2. We've been seeing it go over towards Venenu. Now, I do know that Dardez was the kind of the first player to bring that Cernunnos over into the mid lane to kind of show us what this hunter's capable of there. So, not surprised to see him go there, but really just feels like AMC or Vulcan would have been the go-to for this team. But now the Bolts have the decision to make. Do they want to go for either of those? And if they do, which one do they grab? Which one do they ban away in the next phase?
I'm still astounded that the AMC hasn't been locked in just yet. That is completely shell-shocked.
Mind-blowing.
My own personal idea of how this draft phase was going to start to pan out. If that is Pele lock-in, I'm confirming in my headcanon that we've got the teams right here. But
So awesome.
now the AMC likely just eats a ban, but you're not too concerned about it with a Dodgy on your team. A standard mage ultimate would feel pretty good here. Just something that can follow up on that Powwow consistently. You've got standard beads burned from the Nox. That's single target, so not exactly ideal. But considering how the Bolts are going to need to position in some of these team fights, it's pretty reliable that you'll be able to burn the beads off of Pele. If Ymir decides to pick him up, good luck getting through that Nox wall, essentially. This is a super curious draft phase. I've never seen the Oni Warriors let the AMC through so far, maybe they're concerned about the dive potential of the Bolts. Ymir Wall is very good at locking down the B. Pele in the early game, the second she ticks over to level 5, could try and just run them down. But it is still available, and it would still fit the what would be a double hunter composition draft for the Warriors.
Ishtar, drafted by the Bolts, likely slanted towards the mid since Cupid is already the selection for the hunter position in that duo lane. But I actually do like specifically two of the bans in this regard. The Poseidon from the Olympus Bolts, that's something that Vote has loved to flex towards as a magical, I'm not going to call him a magical hunter, but magical dual lane style of god. It's something he's found a lot of success on. And then the Chiron is something that Venenu has shifted to multiple times in the past for that mid lane to try and get some early pressure. But with that Ishtar lock-in, now the option goes back to the Oni Warriors. Amaterasu being hovered for Nika in the solo lane. And then that opens up the question of, is this Cernunnos for Vote in the duo, or is this Cernunnos for Dardez in the mid lane? Time will tell as we wait for these final two picks to go through.
Yeah, we'll get a little bit of light illuminated on the draft of the Oni Warriors as that starts to pan out. Ishtar's the lock-in, though. God, imagine it's Ishtar in mid. I like the kill potential that Ishtar brings. Might dissuade an AMC pick from the Oni Warriors. And with them still available back towards the Anhur. Considering these games have gone the absolute distance, Anhur falls off pretty significantly. Maybe the Oni Warriors just kind of hedging their bets, saying, look, we were 6K up at the 20-minute mark in the previous game, and the only reason it didn't go so well is because we couldn't secure the Fire Giant that first go-around. This is a draft that could find the exact same pacing as we had seen in Game 2 for the Oni Warriors. Could try and just blitzkrieg the Olympus Bolts once more. But when you look at the Bolts draft, duo lane is pressure through and through. We talked about it ad nauseum for the Oni Warriors. The same is exactly true for the Olympus Bolts, Cupid and Ymir. Very difficult to deal with. Pele, a lot of pressure early on. Ishtar, once she does tick over to level 5, has got one of the best kill pressure ultimates in the game. Just run them down. It operates very similarly to like a Caledonian boar. So I like what the Bolts have got. It's fight the Oni Warriors at that early portion. If in Game 2 it was the Oni Warriors the only one willing to play for the first 15 minutes, the Olympus Bolts in Game 3 had said, look, we're adapting, and we're gonna do the exact same thing and bring the fight to you.
Well, the last pick for the Olympus Bolts is that Guan Yu. A lot of games picked up. I believe it said 21 games played, but hasn't had the best performance so far, sitting around a 38% win rate on that. So for the Olympus Bolts, they've got a Guan Yu Ymir frontline, and in these couple of backline carries with this, with this Cupid. Good area denial out there. Ishtar with her ultimate, some decent zone control in that regard. For the Olympus Bolts, do you think this Guan Yu is a strong final selection to kind of round out their composition?
Guan Yu is strong in these late game team fights in that you're just going to have massive healing and you're going to have a pretty consistent initiator. My concern is how often are you going to be allowed to channel Talu Assault? That's going to be an issue in the laning phase up against this Amaterasu. She'll silence it every time. In the team fight, could be Amaterasu doing it. Doubt that it's going to be her job. Probably just the Nox clipping you with that second ability, stopping it every single time again. But you're not locking in Guan Yu for Talu Assault in the team fight. You're locking in Guan Yu for Cavalry Charge. You're locking him in for being able to defense shred the objectives. You're locking him in for the healing that he brings to these incredibly long dances. What were it 5-6 minute dances we had seen around the Fire Giant in the previous game. Being able to match some of that sustain and add it up with sustain from Cupid means that the Olympus Bolts in a war of attrition will feel very, very good. Whereas the Oni Warriors, looks to me, it's, hey, we need those beads burnt. We want the powwow pulling, and someone's got to die immediately, because if this fight goes past the first 2 rotations of abilities, you just don't have as many resources as the Bolts.
Will the sustain of the Bolts be able to match up? Can they find themselves the reverse sweep in this set? Can the Oni Warriors find their first regular season win against the Bolts? We'll find out in game number 3 with Dulcin and Trelly.
That's right. There's a lot at play here in game number 3. Not only the history of these two teams against one another. Remember how important the standings are at the end of Phase 3 here. Bottom 2 teams don't even get a chance during the Phase 3 playoffs, have to go to the play-ins at the beginning of next year to fight through that and then go to Worlds. And the Olympus Bolts right now in the bottom 3. And so a win here goes a long way in distancing themselves just a bit from the bottom of that table. And so, Trelly, there's plenty at play here. And the Oni Warriors, of course, you want to be as high up in those standings as possible. The seeding, of course, going in to the Phase 3 playoffs, very important. The top 2 teams at that event only have to win 1 set to guaranteed go to Worlds. And so 2 teams on opposite ends of the standings right now with opposite roles to play and opposite desires and outcomes of this set. And such interesting compositional pivots going into game 3 here, Trailer, with BaRRaCCuDDa and Jake now on the Cupid Ymir duo lane, where NeilMah is playing the Nox, with Vote over on the Anhur. And so a lot of the same characters, we've just swapped sides.
Yeah, definitely a little strange, and I think, you know, the Ishtar mid raises some questions for me, not in the sense that I don't think it's good. I'm just, you know, what are they trying to do with this Ishtar? Is it going to be that shred style of build with the kin size, or are you going more towards crit and just letting BaRRaCCuDDa take care of all that penetration? You got LASBRA on the Pele, not going with the blink though, is going to go with the beads, putting some respect on Cuvo. That 1v1 has been happening consistently, whether it was the Mercury into the Pele or even before that. So I want to see where everyone decides to get active. And in game 3, typically, it's much more passive play, right? It's not getting active early, it's hiding and sitting back until ultimates come through, that sort of thing. But with LASBRA and QvoFred on one of their favorite characters, respectively, I mean, Cuvo on Dodgy, a pick we do not get to see often because of how dynamic and strong he is on this character. NeilMah taking a lot of damage as well.
Oof. Just another couple autos into Neil. Would have been first blood for the Olympus Bolts, but QvoFred hovering over on left would have made the difference there if we had ended up full on fighting. And LASBRA will wrap around behind Dardez, who will dash away and be just fine.
I can't believe Vote took the Anhur.
Yeah, that is surprising, isn't it?
I mean, like, there's so many. I guess it was deep in the draft, right? So, you know, I think us on the cast and on the desk, we're all thinking, okay, this AMC's been going untouched so far. Like, is that going to be picked up here? Wasn't the case. I guess the Oni Warriors were kind of tired of that character, especially very hard to position the AMC into things like the Ymir. But Vote taken, one of Dardez's favorite gods, is definitely a confusing one because usually you want to sit back and just fast track the late game over in the duo. But I guess more so focused on that the wall potential. I think it's some decent combo.
Yeah, we'll see what Vote can get done. The Ymir over in lane, 2v2 for the blue buff. The Olympus Bolts able to invade successfully. Oni Warriors attempting to do the same on the red buff. Really, it's just awesome Jake, but Dardez kites it back. Yes, nicely, and NeilMah will assist in picking up some of that golden experience. Now, the big question always is, you got a Dodgy on your team, Palau, fantastic. As long as beads are down on the opposing team, you've got LASBRA with beads, Ven with beads, BaRRaCCuDDa with beads to start off this game. There's maybe room for concern, Trelly, with where the rest of the CC comes from. Do you think there's room for concern for the Oni Warriors here? You've got Palau that either burns beads or follows up on burnt beads. Is there enough CC elsewhere to really set up that dynamic?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be that big of an issue here for Cuvo, considering the fact that NeilMah's on the Nox. You know, that's really great at burning the beads. Of course, Dardez with his Wild Hunt ultimate. That's some annoying CC you never want to deal with. And then Nika has been so dynamic on the Amaterasu, the Dazzling Offensive. Should be able to pull them as well. I'm more concerned about how Ven is going to watch the positioning on this Ishtar, just because, you know, it's pretty easy to get caught out. That jolt dash, very similar to Medusa and pretty easy to body block. So if you're losing your dash, it doesn't really matter if you got beads or not. You're just probably dying in that instance. And not a lot of peel until Awesome Jake does decide to rotate in. Doesn't have a blink or a shell. Awesome Jake does have the frenzy pop, so that's going to be extra DPS, sure. And that's going to help on objectives and things, but not going to help keep this Ishtar alive. If Ven's getting aggressive, though, not going to matter too much.
Right. You know, Ishtar's kind of become one of my favorite hunters to play. Like, the kit feels very fluid. And obviously something in that first ability for every type of scenario. Sometimes see different looks at builds on Ishtar, but looks like Death's Toll and Devourer's Gauntlet for all 4 of the carries we've got here in this game, and then Death's Toll for Nika as well over in the solo lane. Nika's down to half HP and almost no mana. Really would like this blue buff and is able to drop it with the help of QvoFred. So the Olympus Bolts, Charlie, early here in game number 3 have identified potentially the right side of the map as an area where farm can be stolen, blue buffs can get invaded, and maybe that's where LASBRA and Baskin can find an advantage. Back in goes QvoFred. Is a Palau waiting, but LASBRA has beads. Dardez throws out the second ability.
No.
LASBRA will be just fine. Cuvo holds on to the ult.
Yeah, I think Cuvo wanted to find a 1v1 there. Doesn't know Awesome Jake and Venner turn the corner.
No.
There's the blink. Has not used the Palau yet. We're going to see a little bit of a chase here, and actually more so focused on running away towards the left side of the map. BaRRaCCuDDa
Neil's coming to help.
is rotating on the way. I don't imagine Qvo's in any more danger, though. There's no way this Dodgy is chased that far.
Ven is collapsing in as well. This actually, could this bite the Olympus Bolts suddenly? No, because it looks like NeilMah and Vote are just on the purple buff. They're just fine, so the roundabout escape from QvoFred pays off. It actually helps out steal a purple buff. Pulls BaRRaCCuDDa away from it. Awesome Jake was over in mid anyway. So definite delay of timing there from Qvo, who's fallen about a level behind LASBRA. At least benefits the Oni Warriors in stealing a purple buff away from BaRRa.
Yeah, I can see where Qvo's head was. I mean, you look at LASBRA's build, has the beads online, but Volcanic Lightning was down. A blink pal out getting the beads down, and then a dash after the fact could have been enough to try and find the kill. Maybe just didn't realize that Awesome Jake and Ven were rounding that corner, but a good escape nonetheless. We are seeing more of that pressure put over towards the right side of the map. LASBRA stealing away the Greater Scorpion. Baskin has been pretty dominant in lane so far, but I think that Ama just naturally loses to most Warriors early on until she can full clear with the shield dash combo. After that comes through, then Ama is usually able to just free farm around the map. So probably smart that LASBRA was looking towards those blue buffs invades for the time being, but I think those days are done. Nika should be able to hold his own in this lane pretty fine, but it's been pretty early gold furies as well being pulled from both of these squads. I mean, when you got double ADC comps like this, you're really able to go over that objective and shred pretty early on if you can use both ADCs to your advantage, but I imagine that's why we're seeing so much pressure towards that right side of the map, because Pyromancer usually gets looked at first.
Well, we've reached stack time now for the 4 carries we've got in this game. Devourer's Gauntlet picked up for everyone, and so that'll take a bit of time to spin up, but kind of keeps the pacing, even. Still opportunities for junglers to step forward then. There's a nice little gold lead built up for the Olympus Bolts. As we've looked at, a lot of it's been over on right where Baskin and LASBRA have combined for a couple of invades here and there. That's where Nika's looking now. But it's Baskin who's got help. Cavalry charge forward, dazzling offensive, no stuns. Ven gets one, and Ven with first blood, a wild hunt from Dardez. Only polymorphs and delays, and the Olympus Bolts get first blood here in game 3.
That's a great rotation in from the mid laners. Ven able to claim that first blood. I was curious to see, because I saw Dardez was on the way over, but did not make it in time, and Nika gets caught out a little bit too far, though. That's one of the issues with Dazzling Offensive. It's a long channeled ability, but Cavalry Charge is so much longer. You can ride the horse for as long as you really need to try and confirm that stun. Stun was off the mark, but the DPS, especially that cripple field coming in from Ven, was enough to confirm that kill, and now give a little bit of a lead over to the Olympus Bolts. Actually, not a little bit. That lead is really starting to climb here. I mean, as far as I was concerned, I thought maybe about a 1K, but 2,000 gold at this point off of just some kills.
Oof.
That's pretty absurd.
That was a necessary freeze, I think, from Awesome Jake. Pillar up, root there from NeilMah, stun from Vote onto BaRRa. It's really nice there. Could have been a Desert Fury, but Jake very quick on the freeze. Baskin would love to steal away this blue buff. QvoFred is close, obviously not threatened by the presence of QvoFred. It's confirmed blue buff for Nika. LASBRA hovering towards the left. Looks like we'll just drop a ward and head on back to farming things up here. And with how good of a game BaRRa and Ven had, the 2 carries of the Bolts in game 2, I don't think we can forget how good of a game Vote was having on this Cupid. I mean, Cupid totally changed the way that the first 25 minutes looked. So BaRRaCCuDDa obviously now has some of that potential. And Dardez maybe with the initiation with the Wild Hunt out of the mid lane this game is where you're starting to look. And so as we get towards that 10-minute mark, of course you're looking towards the first Pyro Trelly, but first Gold Fury, really, when you've got as much shred as both of these two teams have, maybe it changes up just the pacing of the match in general. When you're able to shred down on Gold Fury a bit faster, maybe it just totally changes how the first 10 to 15 minutes get played.
Yeah, certainly does. Vote losing out on his own purple buff, tried to drop the Desert Fury, not going to be the case. And now this has to be a gold attempt at the very least.
I am so smart.
With Awesome Jake here, the wall is going to be enough. The Frenzy gets popped. I don't think there's too much steal potential except for the ult from NeilMah, and it's too little, too late. Great call from Dave. That's the only reason that it came through.
Every once in a while, I say what's like the most obvious thing, and then it just kind of happens, and it makes me look better, better than I really am. But it is a great call from the Olympus Bolts to go over, pick it up.
It is a great call from me.
For me. That was amazing by me, if I do say so myself. But there's no answer from the Oni Warriors over on the Pyromancer. It was just too slow on the rotation out, and that frenzy does make a difference here. Have to imagine for the Bolts. And so as far as setting the stage goes, Trelly, yes, we haven't fought yet. Yes, we haven't had these team fights. We haven't even had ganks. But the Bolts are starting to set this stage for themselves that they're going to have maybe a little extra itemization online when that first team fight breaks out.
Yeah, I think it's more than a little. I mean, this gold lead is kind of absurd. Like 3K off of 1 Fury, that is just superior farming throughout the map. That's not just the gold Fury for that extra boon of gold. I mean, you know, Ven made the good rotation over to right lane. Baskin's had enormous amounts of pressure on this Guan Yu immediately into a Pyromancer. You can see NeilMah and Dardez are here to try and go for the steal. Or maybe try and go for the fight of the Olympus Bolts. Good wall, forces Neil to the left, and that root is going to make sure that freeze goes down. But Ven didn't drop it. And Pyromancer easily goes the way of the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah, my goodness, and more gold for them there as well. And so you start to get to this territory. Okay, we're at 10 minutes. Normally that's when we're considering Pyro. That's when we're considering Gold Fury. But the Bolts, with the shred composition, have made quick work of both of those objectives.
Yep.
And so the opportunity for the Bolts or for the Warriors rather, to answer back somewhere maybe feels limited here, Trelly. They've got to find a way, maybe on the map itself, without the neutral objectives, to pull back some of this gold. But maybe the Bolts have just done too good a job defending their own side of the map.
I love this from Awesome Jake, though. You can tell what the Olympus Bolts mindset is just from the itemization. If the Bolts are trying to play for late game, that's a Witchblade 10 out of 10 times. The Bolts are trying to get active early, dive, tower, look for an early Fire Giant. That's an Emperor's Armor, and Awesome Jake is saying, I'll be the first one into these fights. We're trying to dive you. We don't care if you're hiding under tower. That's the play game. So now LASBRA has a little bit of extra help out when trying to dive these towers, and actually Awesome Jake is over there and left trying to dive the tower. Like, this is the kind of play that you expect him to make with an itemization change like that. You want to be able to put as much pressure as possible. Vote's not safe, even underneath the tower at this point. BaRRaCCuDDa, no fear in the world, finished up that kin size. The DPS certainly coming through. But I just love this itemization. You can tell that Awesome Jake is tired of sitting by, wants to get active. And Dardez with a little bit of HP underneath this tower could be in some trouble if LASBRA decides to blink under.
Yeah, I was wondering if we would. He's got the beads, but can still dash in. Dardez sustains up just fine. Now it's 4 members of the Bolts making their way mid. No minion wave here, so we'll have to take a deep breath. Baskin just proxying out the wave. Why not? Worst case scenario, you toss up the cavalry charge and gallop away. Wonder if he'll...
Nope.
I was wondering if he would stick around for the blue buff, because Baskin has looked in the face of QvoFred and Nika and said, I don't care, while invading a blue buff 2 or 3 times so far this game. And the 1-level lead for this Guan Yu has started to build up as a result, really across the map. These just slight half-level experience leads there for the Olympus Bolts, whereas itemization, gold-wise, that's the big difference here in the first 13 or so minutes. So a minute and a half left, Trelly. That's when the Primal Fury will spawn out here. And the Bolts, I mean, not only are you ahead, but you have the ability to burn the Gold Fury so quickly 4 minutes ago. That might be the first opportunity for the Warriors to be on time, but right on time. It's LASBRA ganking duo. BaRRaCCuDDa presses delete and votes an afterthought. Now the Olympus Bolts have a real good look at a purple buff invade and maybe an easier Primal Fury here in the next minute.
Yeah, that's my issue always with defensive Desert Furies. You can't pop an Aegis. Didn't even have Aegis, actually, was still only having the beads, but you're so susceptible to the amount of damage that can come through from someone like LASBRA and BaRRaCCuDDa, losing that purple buff as well. QvoFred not going to be able to confirm that one. And now we're looking at a level 14 Cupid with the tier 1 tower over and left gone. I mean, this has been all Bolts all the time. 5,000 gold after a Pyromancer and a Gold Fury. Like I said, that is not just those objectives. That is superior play throughout the map. Dardez going to lose some beads here, and now NeilMah's walled off for the time being.
Yeah, Neil's in a bad spot, but none of the damage from the Bolts funnels its way into the Oni Warriors support. So Primal Fury is effectively back up at this point. It's going to be a real momentum check from the Oni Warriors if they choose to stand up under this Primal. Because really what you're starting to look at is the stage is getting set for the type of game where the Oni Warriors never had the chance or the decision really to draw that line and say, all right, Bolts, we're not letting you get this objective. Okay, not that one. We're not letting you get this objective. But the Bolts so far ahead now that you can't tell them no, around the Primal Fury here. You can't fight. Though this is a good look from QvoFred, and my goodness. LASBRA loses almost all of his HP. Maybe that's right on time for the Oni Warriors, but what a wall from Awesome Jake. Ven uses his ult. QvoFred drops down into safety, and it's the Oni Warriors pulling out the Primal Fury. But they'll drop it once the Bolts show up.
Yeah, Nika has the teleport in. Not going to bring too much after that. I mean, LASBRA gets poked down, but I believe was not worried about the damage there. It was like, at worst, I'll have to beads out the Pele, but there's never really 100 to 0 potential here coming from Cuba, but still a ton of damage. And now you can tell that Baskin might be on the way over as well. Already shows up. And this Gold Fury, or Primal Fury rather, is already pulled. So much sustain here, but Awesome Jake stepping forward.
There's a big moment here in game number 3. Primal Fury reset. Frenzy used. Nika dazzling offensive, doesn't get any stuns. The Bolts have shrugged it off. One set of beads used. That's Venenu. And so I think maybe Warriors fans happy to at least see the Warriors step up under an early objective, but that was the attempt. The Oni Warriors, they stick around. The Bolts have re-picked it back up. The Primal Fury goes to the Bolts. Wild Hunt catches out Awesome Jake. QvoFred does not have Pele, and therefore does not have a hope at initiation.
Yeah, I was keeping my eye on LASBRA. Almost wrapped around that Primal Fury there, but decided to give it up. And I like this from the Oni Warriors. Immediately head over to right. You got a chance at that Pyromancer with the DPS from Nika. Should be absolutely free. I don't think any Bolts are going to be here in time. So get the consolation prize at the very least of the Pyromancer and try and close up this massive hill that the Olympus Bolts have built for themselves, which is the gold lead.
Yep.
I mean, BaRRaCCuDDa seems like there's nothing in the world he's afraid of, been stepping up consistently to tier 2 tower. Vote level 13, has not a hope in the world of fighting into this Cupid. I mean, a full kin size down. I mean, I guess 2 tiers of the kin size, but either way, that boxing match does not look good for Vote. Now Dardez might be in some trouble. Dashes out the ultimate, but Cuvo's here.
Uh-oh, Cuvo still has a lot of damage. That tier 2 hi-rez, while weak in stature, very strong in stats. One chain onto Ven, one pull onto Ven, and one kill to the Oni Warriors. And that, just what the doctor ordered. Relieve a bit of pressure. And no mid laner for the next 40 seconds. Gives the Oni Warriors a chance at a tier 1 in mid.
Yeah, they got some time. Jake's got the Emperor's armor, but with 3 members of the Oni Warriors here, that tower is going to drop down quickly. Great ultimate there from Cuvo as well. Was able to grab the beads from LASBRA as well as finding the pick on Ven. That's going to be pretty massive here in the time being. And I think the Oni Warriors, they're not just getting the stuff. They also got the Greater Scorpion. They decided to take that tier 1 tower. They're trying to catch up as much as possible with this one-man advantage. Boat's able to grab 2 levels in that time as well, close up the gap a bit, which is certainly going to help out. You want your Anhur to be firing on all cylinders once this tanky Guan Yu rotates into the fights. But one thing I have noticed, specifically from Baskin, because of these fizz-heavy compositions, it's not like you're getting magic defense. You're not worried about NeilMah. Baskin's been slotting in a Brawlers or some sort of mace item in that slot.
Yep.
Because you're overcapping Fizz D almost every game. Like, you're getting to 325 effortlessly, so you can throw some extra damage. And because of that, I mean, Baskin's consistently on top of the damage charts for the early game. You get some anti-heal, but really, your abilities are starting to chunk.
That Baskin in a very, very strong spot. NeilMah
gone.
Looking a bit weak. The Olympus Bolts not only get a tier 1, but a kill onto the Oni Warrior support. I don't know, has QvoFred overstayed his welcome? I'm afraid so. Honestly, a chain in just delays the inevitable here. Nika deep in the backline of the Olympus Bolts, but I'm not sure the Amaterasu is strong as she was in game number 1. Vote and Dardez have turned around to kill onto LASBRA, but Baskin with a double, Baskin with a triple, sets the stage, and it's enhanced regular fire. Why am I thinking enhanced? It's regular fire giant for the Olympus Bolts after a 3-piece from Baskin.
Baskin is enhanced. Nika hiding behind the corner, wants to go for the possible steal attempt. Can he do it like Baskin did in game number 2? It's not going to be easy, and they're not making the same mistake. They're going to burn Nika first and then go for the fire giant.
The regular fire
giant. The regular fire giant, mind you. Nothing's enhanced except for Baskin's stat line. Triple kill and the fire giant on 4. Unfortunately for LASBRA, not waiting for him, but the Olympus Bolts are certainly heating up here. They're going to grab the tier 1 and right and push up for the tier 2 and left. What a great fight. And again, this Guan Yu, level 19 before 20 minutes. That is some great farming. The triple kill helps, but The cavalry charge was top tier. Nika got to the back line, was not able to replicate that same amount of damage. And this Guan Yu just pops off, especially LASBRA doing a bit of damage before going down as well. The Olympus Bolts certainly looking clean 20 minutes in.
Yeah, I mean, this is what, when you talk about Baskin joining the Olympus Bolts, obviously there's some, like, hyperbole being thrown around. You know, Baskin argued as one of the best players in SMITE history. But the hyperbole is like, you know, he's going to run over the rest of the league. It's not even going to be close. These are the types of games that those folks were talking about. Didn't see it consistently yet for the Bolts, but if it took a must-win game number 3 here for the Olympus Bolts to see it, then it would have been worth the wait. And a really, really strong look. 2 levels ahead of Nika, was 3 a moment ago. And BaRRaCCuDDa also 2 levels ahead. And it's so similar to what the Oni Warriors had in game 1, where you had these 2-level leads on either side of the map. And at the time, the Olympus Bolts didn't have much of an answer. Now it's the Oni Warriors who are backs against it. Very early FG, usually set the stage for the rest of the game. Well, LASBRA now with Blink. Yeah, you got to make Dardez back away. This QvoFred over in mid, but we're Phoenix sieging here, Trilly. You got the Emperor's armor. Why not? Let's see what we can get going. BaRRaCCuDDa, though, melted through. QvoFred in the back line. The Oni Warriors. Whoa! They found a pick. Pele on the 1. It's awesome. Jake pulled back in. Venenu cutting backwards masterfully. Baskin left alone, but he's barely taken any damage. Baskin has solo tanked against 4 of the Oni Warriors. And the Olympus Bolts, they still got health, but the Oni Warriors have numbers.
And they're not afraid to try and seize this one. Baskin ripping away at Dardez's HP.
Whoa.
As it looks like Nika could be in a little bit of trouble here. LASBRA dive in the back line.
Well, LASBRA gets one, but trades out his life with Vote. Left side Phoenix still stands. Is it happening again? Is a team on defense gonna survive? No, Ven shreds down the Oni Warriors. A double kill for Venenu. Another 3-piece Olympus Bolts. They get 2 triples in this game and now have eyes for the end. The Oni Warriors, no one alive, and what a game, what a turnaround, and what a set. Olympus Bolts, they come out on top.
It's gonna take a bit, but this Titan is certainly gonna be burned down. What a fantastic performance from Venenu and Baskin in game number 3. Sorry, BaRRa, you got picked at the Phoenix, but we don't need ya. They win that fight. 4v5 at that point, but I do think this was all, Jake set the stage, man. When I saw Emperor's Armor's second item,
that's right.
I knew they wanted to get aggressive. I knew they were looking for these early FGs. One fight was all it took. Once that Fire Giant opened up, they had all the itemization they needed to try and burn through that Phoenix. And turns out, when you get a deicide, you only need 1 Phoenix down. That Titan went real quick as well.
And Charlie, think about how he got here. Game 1, convincing for the Oni Warriors. Game 2.5, convincing for the Oni Warriors. Right, from that point on, well, the end of game 2 was still pretty back and forth.
Yeah.
But the Oni Warriors probably feel like they've let one get away from themselves here. I mean, you're 12,000 gold up in game 2. You let BaRRaCCuDDa make a miracle play. The Bolts kind of sneak away with one. And then in game 3, the confidence just starts to flow. Bolts fans wondering where this Bolts has been all phase long. Now, looked good against the Oni Warriors last time we saw these 2 teams play. Now it's about doing this consistently for the Olympus Bolts. Could this be the start of a changing of the tides for this Bolts team? The rest of the phase will let us know, but the desk for now will let us know what happened here in game 3.
Game 3, I think the best way to put it is just stop focusing Baskin. I mean, I want to kind of zoom in towards that last little team fight there. You know, BaRRaCCuDDa gets picked off very early, Mifflin during that fight, and now the Oni Warriors kind of push forward and then realize, okay, maybe we probably shouldn't leave our Phoenix. They back themselves up, and Baskin dives into the Phoenix and lives for God knows how long with 3 people trying to focus him down. He walks out, comes back in, still gets focused down, still doesn't die, and the Oni Warriors just crumble under the might of the damage output that Venenu has during all of that one. It really feels like this came down to another case of what happened, you know, in game number 2, where they're trying so much, investing so much into killing one person, but that one person just is not dying.
Yeah, but before I jump into maybe some of the mistakes that we'd seen from the Warriors, we got to sing the praises of the Olympus Bolts. That was a clear and concise game. Some of the issues that we had been talking about in weeks past was how is their macro going to look? How's their shot calling going to look? Are they all going to be on the same page? How are their objective calls going to go? I'd argue very, very good here. I mean, they were all playing the same way. It felt like they were concise on their decisions. They had very clear ideas of where they needed to go after fights or before fights. So those concerns for the Olympus Bolts, very quickly alleviating themselves.
And with a win for the Olympus Bolts, the player standing by, not the traditional Hunter player, but the one who was playing the Hunters today, Venenu, the mid laner, standing by with Dave for the postgame.
Yeah, let's be honest. Nowadays, mid laners are just traditional Hunter players, right? Is that just the meta we're in? ADCs all day?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, mages just rough out there, you know.
Well, look, BaRRaCCuDDa played the Soul a couple times here in this set. It was specifically in Game 2, mage-esque build, and that's where I want to start here. Game 2, miraculous turnaround by you guys. I mean, you're what, 12,000 gold down, something like that. Going into the FG. BaRRaCCuDDa, though, just kind of evaporates the opposing team, evaporates the Warriors. You guys turn it around there. In a moment like that, is that Hail Mary, we just got a team fight here, try to get it done type of play, or was that a surprise to everyone that it happened that way?
I think when they're sieging the Titan, and when you're that late into the game, death timers are like 70 seconds, I think 80 seconds long, and 2 of them died, and then it's 3v5. Even if you have 3 Phoenixes down, you can kind of just run it down. And we just ran it down and hoped to win there, and we won. So,
do you think that type of win describes the Bolts as a team, you know, the never give up type of mentality, you're always in it type of squad? Do you think the Game 2 describes your team in general, kind of how you operate as a squad?
Well, we don't want to be losing, right? Like we don't want to be in the scenario where we're losing, because that's rough. I mean, yeah, scrims can be a little bit different sometimes, but I mean, when you're playing an SPL, you can't really give up. You just have to kind of like keep jamming it and hope something comes out. But yeah, I mean, we're working on what we have to work on. Obviously, a brand new player and stuff like that. Like learning the game, learning us, and we're learning with him. So, yeah, I mean, we just got a bunch of stuff to work on, and yeah, happy with the results so far. So. Sure.
Well, look, game 3 was what felt like a really standout performance from Baskin. You know, felt unkillable. The Guan Yu, near untouchable. But you as well at the end of this game. Baskin gets a triple earlier on. You get a triple kill on the Ishtar here. Walk me through what you're seeing in this team fight. I mean, you're W keying by the end of it.
Yeah, so we actually, our comms were to get out here, and I was like, yeah, I can't die here, and I just held W key the whole entire time. Like Ishtar and that late into the game, like you were hitting like an absolute truck. Yeah. So, I mean, if you just hold W key, you can probably 1v9, but yeah. It was fun, though.
That's right. Look, Baskin, you can't be the only one giving a triple over. You know what I mean? You got to be able to get a triple kill here for yourself. Also continues the trend. Oni Warriors haven't beaten you guys during the regular normal split ever. And Game 2 is like the most crazy turnaround we've got. You think there's some like voodoo magic maybe sprinkled here in Game 2?
Probably. I mean, they probably should have won the Game 2. I think we actually played it really well, like what they were doing. They had a pretty good setup, but Baskin got a really good blink Odin cage on them, which pretty much just solidified it because Qvo couldn't get out. Yeah. So we just kind of like blew him up, and then we just win the game off of that. So I mean, I'm happy with the performance of the boys, and we got a bunch to work on still, but we're getting there. I mean, just a lot of odd review and stuff. So. Yeah.
Look, little bits at a time. We're working towards Worlds, and this is a fantastic set from you guys. Congrats again on the win, and we'll send it back to the desk to wrap up this set.
You heard from Venenu there. Even though still some things to work on, definitely going to take the small victories that they can, one step at a time, continue to find that improvement, and really kind of solidify maybe the hope of the Olympus Bolts fans out there. Because, I mean, we're pushing up towards the end of this this first half of the phase, and fans are going, man, are we going to see the Olympus Bolts back on the rise? Or are we going to see some dubs coming from these guys? Or are we going to give up hope? I think finding now 2 turnaround sets like this, because they did the exact same things against the Oni Warriors the last time they faced off. Oni Warriors took a decisive game number 1. Game 2 is real back and forth. Then game 3, complete sweep the opposite direction there. So the Olympus Bolts, it seems it takes them a game to warm up. Again, we're back in the first week after kind of a week off there. But Olympus Bolts are finally starting to find that stride.
And I would argue probably just a very heavily momentum-based team are the Olympus Bolts. Once they found that win in such a arduous Game 2, pretty easy to keep the momentum rolling into Game 3. But you had brought up a little bit earlier that we had seen the Oni Warriors, not only in Game 2, but also here in Game 3, spend just so much time focusing Baskin. And I think that might be a habit that has developed for the Oni Warriors due to the compositions that they have run in the past. It's a whole lot of AMC comps. And what does AMC do? He puts a stinger in whoever's in front of him. You kill that guy, you pick up the stinger, you rinse, repeat. That's a habit-building style of play. You get so used to being able to just shred whoever's in front of you that even when you're not on that pick, maybe some of those habits start to persist. And I think that is what comes to bite the Oni Warriors in a couple of the engagements here today. But Gotta give full credit to the Olympus Bolts in Game 3, even regardless of maybe some target selection issues from the Oni Warriors. The Bolts were 3,500 gold up before the first actual team fight of the game. The macro play was clean. The objective calls were clean. Knowing when and where they needed to be and how to get there all works very well, and the Bolts look great in this set.
And I think even kind of zooming into that last little fight around the Phoenix, I mean, Baskin goes in, soaks up the damage from the Phoenix, kind of puts a couple of eyes onto him. LASBRA then jumps into the backline against 3, eats an impale at least from the Anhur at a vote there, and keeps a couple of members distracted in that regard. And it just leaves Venenu there to free cast. I think he took maybe 15% of his health in damage throughout the entirety of that last little Phoenix defense. So target selection and maybe at least target distraction by the Bolts, able to keep their mid laner alive, allow Venenu to take the top of the damage charts, if only just barely above Baskin, who was able to also mitigate 30,000 damage of his own while nearly taking top damage there. So Olympus Bolts keep their streak up, allowing themselves to continue to stay undefeated in regular season play against the Warriors.
And the Warriors, I'm sure, probably kicking themselves, right? I mean, Ven said it himself. That game, too, maybe probably should have just gone to the Warriors, considering the pacing of it and how some of those objectives started to pan out. But it's twice now, 2 sets in a row, where the Olympus Bolts legitimately win entire sets up against the Warriors off the back of objective steals and just walking into Fire Giants and calling the bluff of, hey, you got to confirm it. You know, most teams might just let this one go. We're not going to do it. So great credit to the Olympus Bolts. And I think Dave really hits the nail on the head with the identity of this team. We may be down, but never out. Going to just buckle down, put our guard up, and make you earn these wins. And sometimes teams fumble in those situations.
Worked well for the Olympus Bolts. They're able to take the win in our first set of the day. We can take a look at the schedule because we've got one more set coming up after this one. That'll be the Jade Dragons up against the Solar Scarabs. Now with our first set of the day done, 2-1 over towards them. And then make sure to tune in for the rest of the weekend because it's triple headers, not just on Sunday, but also on Saturday. We'll get to see some very intense matchups there. We'll get a rematch between the Leviathans and the Valkyries over on Sunday. We'll get to see some other big matchups between the Bolts and the Scarabs. So they're definitely going to be keeping my eyes over onto that one. And then the Jade Dragons, Camelot Kings to start tomorrow too. Should be a lot of great matchups here, but I think kind of zooming into this next one, the Jade Dragons and the Solar Scarabs facing off for the second set. Definitely going to be a very important one for the Scarabs to kind of, now they've had a week to play with Hurrywin. Now they've had some downtime to get a little bit of practice in there, get some of that scrim scheduling into there. I'm curious to see what the Solar Scarabs are going to bring to the table kind of moving into our second set. And at least taking out a look at the standings, should be at least pretty good for the Olympus Bolts, even though they were sitting around that bottom 3, still technically sitting in that bottom 3, if not only just because they're sitting with one extra loss to the Tartarus Titans. Gives a little bit of hope. And it was something that Dave kind of pitched over during the waiting room was, of these bottom 3 teams, what was kind of the more likely of those 3 to make it out of that bottom 2 spot? Which one was going to get a little bit secure? With a win by the Olympus Bolts, gives their fans and gives them a little bit more hope to make it towards the playoffs as opposed to the play-ins.
Yeah, I'm sure the Olympus Bolts fans will keep their eyes on, well, of course, the rest of the sets the Olympus Bolts have to play, but namely this next Tartarus Titans set that we're going to get tomorrow. I think it'll be very interesting and has massive implications for seeding as we start to move closer and closer to that world stage. I'm so certain that the Olympus Bolts are nearly completely out of that funk that they found themselves in after some of those roster changes. I'm so certain we're going to get them back to prime form very shortly. My only concern is, how many times are you going to be able to drop game 1 as you did in sets like this and then find these massive, long, drawn-out comebacks? I want to see the Olympus Bolts bring early wins, win a game 1, start to get some momentum rolling on your own. Game 3, I think, a great indication of what they're capable of once they're feeling good.
Yeah, kind of bring that game 3 energy into game number 1 and game number 2 and make them a little bit easier for themselves to where they don't have to do these 45-minute struggles up against some of these other teams, because definitely some of these teams at the top end of the brackets can do so through. But that's it for set number 1. We got our second set of the day, Solar Scarabs and the Jade Dragons, coming up right after this break.